This is what I love and will miss about this class so much. Your enthusiasm for one another is infectious, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. Thank you to our upcoming graduates, their families and loved ones, and administrators for coming out tonight to recognize and celebrate the amazing accomplishments of these individuals. You folks should be very proud of what you have accomplished. I'd like to ask our award and scholarship recipients to please stick around for at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes, as many of the donors are present at this event, and I'm sure many of them wish to congratulate you themselves. Folks, have a wonderful evening, stay safe, make good choices, and we will all look forward to celebrating this amazing group on Wednesday the 24th. Thank you.
Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Robert, would you do the honors and lead us off?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Madam Secretary, can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Clarkson? Here. Ms. Cohn? Mr. Delia? Mr. Erickson?
Here.
Ms. Gelber? Ms. Koskowski?
Here.
Mr. Lifton?
Here.
Mayor Bush?
Here.
Mr. Coughlin? Ms. Zachariah?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, declare a quorum present. Just very briefly before we begin tonight, it's been some time since this board has been together, and I want to acknowledge the passing of our dear friend, Alan Grossman, who served for the better part of 3 decades on this board, and whose vote figured prominently in some of the most important applications this board was favored to hear. Alan had a kind smile and generous nature about him, but he was a formidable man. You know, he had that combination of humility and common sense that is so rare. And on the board, and I say this not lightly, he was a towering figure of consistency. You'd always rely on him. And as others have said, he was the very best of us. So thank you for your service, Alan, and we will miss you. Okay, moving on to new business for this evening, which is going to be, hopefully, the adoption of a new master plan. Who would like to start us off? Chris, Mayor?
I'll just give you a little background. So every 10 years, the municipality is required to adopt either a re-examination of the existing master plan or a new master plan. Otherwise, the zoning ordinances.
Robert, I have to apologize. I got a little emotional about Alan, and I forgot to read the Open Public
Oh, we
Meeting.
can't
Would you
do
allow me?
that.
Could you allow me to do that now, since I'm
Absolutely.
such?
We didn't do a roll call either, did we?
We did do a roll call, but I did not do the meeting, so I apologize for that. So I'll do it in retrospect. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act pursuant to Public Law 1975, Chapter 231. Said notice was published in the Home News Tribune on mycentraljersey.com on January 22nd of this year, as well as sent to the Star Ledger for informational purposes. Said legal notice is also posted on the Borough of Metuchen Bulletin Board and the Borough website under legal notices. All requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act were satisfied. My apologies for not reading that earlier. And Robert, you would
Okay.
be so kind as to please
So,
continue.
master plan has to be either re-examined or adopted every 10 years. Otherwise, the municipality's zoning ordinances are presumed not to be valid or continue to be valid. And it leaves the borough open to possible challenges to its zoning ordinance. So and that's not the only reason, but the master plan is supposed to be a grand design for the zoning and planning of the municipality. So we have this evening our planner, Chris Cosenza, is going to talk about the proposed master plan. Whether it's necessary or not, I'm going to swear Mr. Cosenza in, let him give testimony. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I'm going to turn it over, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, to Mr. Cosenza.
All right, Chris, let us have it.
All right, here we go. Much like the historic preservation plan element was dedicated to Richard Weber, this master plan is dedicated to Alan Grossman.
Chris, could you please speak up and
Sure.
to the mic?
So as a general agenda for what we're going to be covering tonight, comes in 5 parts. The first part, we're talking about what a master plan is and is not. I know Bob Bernard gave a brief overview. I'm going to go a little bit more detail. How the document's organized, how it was informed throughout the process, a review of the master plan itself, which is the lion's share of the presentation, as well as the review of the reexamination report. So what is a master plan? Simply said, it is a guide, is a plan for the future. Under the statute, NJSA 40:55D28, it must include two things. One is a statement of objectives, principles, assumptions, policies, and standards. Sometimes some communities call them SOPAPs. We've consolidated that as part of our community vision statement. And the second part is a land use plan element. The statute also allows for 15 other optional elements, and Metuchen over the years has adopted 5 of them, which includes housing, recreation, open space, utility service, which includes your stormwater management plan, as well as circulation, and more recently in 2021, the historic preservation plan. So what does a master plan do? It does, again, set the long-range vision planning for policy for community vision. And as Ms. Renaud indicated, it sets the legal foundation for zoning to be consistent. As you recall, when the governing body introduces an ordinance that affects the land development ordinance, it comes to this board, this body, to review for consistency with that master plan. And it generally just guides redevelopment decisions and land use board decisions, and recommends where and how growth should be occurred throughout the community. What does it not do? It does not change the zoning. It does not rezone particular property. It does not amend the zoning map, although that's certainly one of the recommendations, is to update the map. It does not change any of the bulk regulations or zoning ordinance requirements, and does not specific a project. Those things happen later if the borough would so choose. The zoning changes, again, goes through the governing body action by ordinance. So why is the borough updating its master plan? So this really comes into 2 parts. The first part is the 10-year reexamination requirement. Again, for the same statute, MLUL at subsection 89. It must be done every 10 years. The last time the borough updated its reexamination report or adopted one was in July 2016. Therefore, it's timely to do one in July 2026. In fact, since 1988, all of the reexamination reports have been adopted in July of that year. You'll notice that there's in 6-year increments up to 2006. That's because in 2011, the state amended the statute to require, instead of every 6 years, it becomes every 10 years. And the other part of why the borough is updating its master plan, you'll recall, if you were to read the recommendations in the 2016 reexamination report, it called for a community-based vision plan. And we decided as a community, through the Borough Council and through administration, that it will be prudent to do so as really an update to a strategic update to the land use plan. And with that, that included some recommendations as well as technical assistance that we received from New Jersey Transit through its transit-friendly program. We received a technical grant to look at what's called middle housing. I'll describe what that is shortly. Generally, looking at housing options within a half mile of the train station. And with the update to the land use plan by law as of 2021, the state now requires that when you do change your land use plan, you have to do what's called a climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment. We have no other way to avoid it. We have to do one. And it's timely anyway, because a lot of the recommendations and research that went into the CCRHVA, so I'm going to refer to it at this point forward, has a relationship to land use. So how is the document organized? It's a pretty hefty report, I'll admit that. It's a combination of the master plan and a reexamination report. Some communities choose to keep it together, some keep it separate or have different chapters. We decided to keep it as one single report. What you see on the screen are the elements that constitute the master plan. That's the statement of objective policies and assumptions and statements, as well as your land use plan element, as well as the relation to other plans meeting the contiguous municipalities, in this case Edison, Middlesex County, the state, as well as your district management solid waste plan. With regards to how we structured this report, the primary focus is on the land use plan and the CCRHVA. All the other elements that the borough has adopted over the years is mainly reaffirmed and reviewed for consistency and reincorporated by reference as an overview. So we're not really touching, just doing a light touch on recreation, open space, community facilities, which is new, utility service, circulation, and historic preservation. We did not touch the housing plan because that was done just last year to comply with the state statutes for the fourth round rules. But generally speaking, as part of this master plan effort, we did review the housing plan, and it's generally consistent with this new master plan. The other part is the reexamination report. Obviously, chapter 6 is the reexamination report, but there's elements that live in the community context. Typically, when you do a reexamination report, you review the prior goals and objectives of the 2016 plan, and you look at changes that have occurred since then. And most master plans and reexamination reports also, as part of this changes review, also look at demographic changes. So things like population change, housing changes, how people use vehicles and whatnot. So that it lives in the community context and shares the community findings from all the community feedback. So that lives in the consolidated section, chapter 2 for community context. So how was the master plan informed? Obviously, we had a pretty large subcommittee, including members of this board, the planning board, the zoning board, members of the environmental commission, Downtown Alliance, staff, as well as the Historical Society and residents. LRK was the lead consultant and author of this report, and we received plenty of help from other professionals and agencies, including New Jersey Transit and their subconsultants, Perkins Eastman, IMEG. They helped us with the gentle density, middle housing near the train station. The College of New Jersey gave us assistance through the Sustainability Institute, also known as the Sustainable Jersey. They gave us technical assistance to develop the CCRHVA, and then Rutgers University, the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning Public Policy. Students assisted my office with some research as well as community meeting support. Other than the subcommittee and technical assistance, public input was a predominant part of developing this plan. There were 3 surveys, Climate Ready Metuchen Survey, the Community Vision Survey, and the Historic Preservation Survey. Based on my experience, it's my view that the community engagement was outstanding in this community, and part of that was because we left the survey out for so long, for about, I think, 6 or 7 months, at least for the Community Vision Survey. The Historic Preservation Survey came later after we were doing some more research about the findings of the statute and other research. Other ways that the public was able to get involved was through the community open house at the Edgar Middle School in November. We tabled that the Green Fair and Downtown Pride event was really related to the climate change-related hazard vulnerability assessment. We also did questionnaires and interviews. We invited every single board and commission and committee to take part to answer a questionnaire, and I interviewed more than half of the groups. And we also did separate stakeholder surveys, focus groups, including a climate change-related focus group, as well as interviews of all staff at the departments head, rather, not all staff. And of course, thanks to the Metuchen Downtown Alliance, mainly Jay Muldoon and Dawn Mackey, they did their own listening session and gave us feedback on the pulse from the business community. So now we're going to the master plan itself. So this is developed into several different chapters, starting with community context. I think these are things everyone already knows, that Metuchen is nearly built out, 91%. And growth really comes through adaptive reuse, infill development, and redevelopment. That's been a common phrasing we've been using for the last 40 years. Metuchen is growing and becoming more diverse, highly educated, higher income. And aging in place and families is becoming more of a growth. We're seeing increases in the teenagers and 5 to 9 year olds, as well as 65 to 74, which is interesting. And the use of electrical vehicles is climbing in the 08840 zip code. Just for note for that includes the Menlo Park Terrace neighborhood in Woodbridge Township. So it's a little bit skewed, but not too much, because it's a small neighborhood in Woodbridge Township. I'm going to go over just a few of the community context demographics. You'll see here, this is the top left is the Metuchen population over time. Its population peaked in 1970. It was over 16,000, and we're still not at that point. We're probably approaching that sometime in the 2030s. Metuchen's population pretty much bottomed out in the 90s and 2000s, which is not uncommon of, I would referred to as inner ring suburbs. In that same time frame from 1970 to 2020, you'll see the Metuchen's population has been reduced by 1,000. At the same time, Edison's population grew by 40,000, which is basically 2.5 Metuchens in that same time frame. With regard to composition by race, you'll see that Metuchen's population has become more diverse since 2010, but still not quite as diverse as Middlesex County and New Jersey. In terms of the average household size, this was interesting. There's a little bit of a spike in terms of the number of persons per household, and that's driven mainly by the owner-occupied households, which is much higher than the state and county, and a little bit of an increase in growth in the renter households. That is, again, partly skewed by the number of owner-occupied households in Metuchen. You'll see that even though it dropped from the 80s to about 75% in 2023, with a 25% of renter-occupied housing, that is still less. The rate of ownership is still much higher in Metuchen than it is in the county and the state. In terms of vehicle usage, you'll see what was surprising to me is that when we did the research and pulled this data from ACS was that Metuchen only has 3.7% of zero vehicle households, zero vehicles available, which is less than the county and the state. But when you look at the 1 and 2 vehicles, is a higher proportion of those households in Metuchen than it is in the county and the state. And that's partly driven by the change in the ownership rate in vehicle usage. The percentage went less, obviously, for households that own or homeowners, and for rentals, the percentage of no vehicle households went up. And when you look at the county and the state, the proportion of no vehicle versus of no vehicles between renters and owner-occupied is pretty substantial. Metuchen has 15 times more people of a rate than people who don't have a car or renters than homeowners, which is higher than the county and the state. That just means that when we look at land use patterns for downtown, we're just less likely to have vehicles by virtue of mostly apartment housing and its proximity to train station. That plays a role in sort of balancing each other out, while acknowledging that homeowners who live in the outskirts of town, the edges of downtown, will obviously continue to have vehicles. And we're not debating that. We're in Middlesex County. In terms of the development of the community vision, this was in part built on all the feedback received during the community meetings. It gave us a lot of input. What we landed on in the subcommittee was, and I'll just read this, the only time I hope to read this. Metuchen aspires to be a borough where everyday life is defined by connected neighborhoods, a lively downtown, thriving local businesses, and a vibrant arts scene, and where attainable housing, green spaces, and a genuine sense of community ensure that the borough remains welcoming, dependable, and accessible for all who call it home. And this was based on the community input, reacting to a survey question that we posed in the community vision survey, something that came out in 1959 master plan, which is interesting. That still, even today, 62% of survey respondents felt that was still relevant, whether it's very relevant or somewhat relevant. That speaks to how well Metuchen has been thinking about in its future in terms of really what the statement is in 1959 was it acknowledged that it was built out, and not to rest on its laurels, the borough sought to develop a long-range vision which maintained its residential character. That statement has carried over in its master plan since 1959 through 2016, and again, most of the residents felt that it was still relevant today. In terms of the rest of the master plan document, so this is the really meat and potatoes of the document. So we're going to start with land use and the CCRHVA, and then a quick overview of all the other elements. So I'm going to start with land use. Land use is developed in several different sections. First, we start with the overview and kind of changes in land use patterns over the last 60 years. There's a statement of strategy and a public EV charging, which is required by statute. I have a statement related to those items. We're going to review the existing land use and zoning, some key themes that we saw and read through the community feedback as well through the subcommittee. The commercial areas related to downtown Metuchen Arts District as one cohesive node, as well as South Main Street and Central Avenue as secondary nodes, and then the Southwest Gateway. Those were the 4 commercial areas that we study as part of this plan. These help develop the proposed land use plan, as well as the development of the new revised updated goals and recommendations related to land use. So with regard to existing land use, this is just a map that's pulled from the NJDEP land use layer. It's 2020. Everything in red is sort of commercial area, yellow is residential, purple is industrial, and green is green space. This is just data pulled from the state just for observation and how it might relate to zoning. So a little bit of analysis between existing land use and the zoning. What we're finding here is that it's, as expected, it's been a compact center of residential at the edges. You have corridors and nodes at different parts of town, and then we have industrial at the periphery. But in order to get to those industrial areas, you have to drive through residential neighborhoods, which is a concern that's been raised as part of this master plan. What's also interesting to me is that the train station, you may think of it as centered downtown, but it's actually off-centered to the commercial areas. You'll note that most of the commercial areas are to the west of the train station. In terms of the existing zoning map, this gives me anxiety to look at because it's an outdated map that has some missing districts that we identified during the master plan process over the last 18 months. There are several missing districts, and of course, it does not have the redevelopment areas that have been adopted over the past 10 years. So we feel that this is an opportunity to update and digitize it, which we've done through this effort. So this has all the missing districts, including the R6 zone, which actually was not deleted back in 2005, as well as some changes in the district boundaries at F1 and R2 district and the B3 district. So through research, we identified there's some slight change that need to be made to make sure it's accurate. In terms of the key themes that we saw during the master plan, there's really three key topics. One is related to housing choice and attainability. This is really discussing about the missing middle housing and trying to right-size homes for smaller households as well as for the lots they sit on, and supporting attainability, supportive housing, and aging in place. Second theme is managing change and growth. This is looking at the standards that we talk about when we have subdivision applications. So how do the houses fit into the neighborhood? And related to that is also looking at there is a need to recalibrate zoning regulations in certain parts of town to avoid the incompatibility of new housing coming in, really cookie cutter homes, as many residents called it, as well as to really create that opportunity for housing choice and sustainability. And number three, downtown vibrancy. We're trying to support Metuchen Downtown Alliance and the businesses that are even not in the district, of course. While the MDA won the Great American Main Street Award, there's still much work to do, and we need to support their efforts. So with regards to housing choice and attainability, the survey indicated that residents were mostly looking for senior housing with independent living, as well as single-family homes on small lots. And as part of the effort of researching missing middle housing, which is really the housing in between single-family and apartment buildings, everything in between is missing. So my duties panels, I really call it as ignored housing. It's a little harsh, but the reality is not many zoning codes, including Metuchen, does not allow for the opportunities for two-family townhouses and even accessory dwelling units and so on and so forth. As part of the development of this master plan, we did get technical assistance from New Jersey Transit through their subconsultants, and they created the gentle density guide. What they identified was that there are opportunities for missing middle housing. However, they're relegated to the R4 district, most of which is already developed, and they're in small pockets in town. So there was a thought of we need to look at around the train station. Obviously, with New Jersey Transit, their interest is to increase ridership, as well as develop their properties that they own throughout the state. But this program looks at gentle increases in density where it's warranted and where it makes sense around the train station. The thought process being that with near transit, there's a less need for vehicle usage, and there's opportunities to use oversized lots for different types of housing. The gentle density guide did go through a series of studies and options for 3 different sites in Metuchen. So this is the consultants' work. What they looked at was, this is referred to as Tulsa Avenue, but it's really South Main Street, south of the Middlesex Greenway and north of Lincoln Avenue. These are the vacant lots that have been sitting vacant for about 20 years. So this is looking at opportunities, and they showed a variety of options of, there could be tiny houses sitting on a green, like a cottage court, could be a single family with a ADU in the back, or a combination of several different types of uses. Another area they studied was in place. As some residents may recall, there was an there was an addition proposed on Highland Avenue that involved raising the building to a 4th story and then paving the remainder of the lot that backs up to residents who front on Highland, Robbins, and Hillside. That application was denied, so we looked at this as an opportunity. Could there be something different, not just apartments, but it's an opportunity for different types of housing, given that in place is a narrow street, there's lack of connectivity, there's a need for some sort of green space as well. And the last opportunities are actually right across the street. So when an emergency services center is constructed, what happens at the firehouse site? If it were to become housing, we looked at that option too. Obviously, it's a very small site. We do want to preserve the historic Washington Hose building, but also look at housing, potentially housing at this site, which could have a sort of appearance like a mini Franklin Square. With regards to managing growth and maintaining character, this is mainly related to single-family infill housing. So tear down and rebuilds and subdivisions all play into this. On the left side, we discussed evaluating neighborhood context. So if you recall, whenever we have subdivision applications, I always ask the question, how does this project relate to the housing characteristics and the lot characteristics of what you're proposing in relation to the neighborhood. And that really came out of a 1999 amendment to the housing plan. And what this master plan does is try to strengthen that a little bit with the premise that all new development should be responsive to the context and should reinforce, not undermine, the neighborhood that it's trying to sit in. With regards to refining zoning and built form, so this is looking at updating and modernizing zoning standards to allow for smaller homes on the lots that are small to begin with. For example, Charles Street and the Radius section have many small lots. They're 40 feet wide, some even less. So we should look at refining standards to allow them, but that means we also need to look at making sure the housing is not so tall or massive on those small lots. And simultaneously, looking at ways to achieve the missing middle housing is looking at refining the zoning standards to consider thinking about two-family ADUs in other parts of the neighborhood, but in areas where they make sense. There's later in the master plan, there's a sort of recommendation of zoning map changes, which I'll review. The third one is livable community, sort of creating and supporting the network of third places. So you work, you live, but what about the place you hang out in? So these are called third places, and really trying to create an inclusive 15-minute community. Also trying to promote and really emphasize the importance of walkability and placemaking, as well as tree canopy and green infrastructure. And with regards to tree canopy, that also means what this master plan strives to do is really what future planning should do is treat trees, landscape yards, parks, stormwater systems, and public open space as part of the overall system and not just amenities. There are things that are nice to look at. So we need to treat trees and sidewalks equally as important to be part of the neighborhood design. And finally, non-residential land use trends. There's been a discussion about the need for Class A office space, but also this flip side is to really look at your light industrial zoning. As of right now, you still permit distribution warehouses. That may not make sense in this age when those standards were written decades ago. They're much lighter use, but have much more intensive these days, as you can see in Edison and in highway corridors throughout the state. What this master plan recommends is reconsidering the light industrial uses, making sure that the low impact uses are the ones that are permitted and eliminating the uses that are not appropriate. With regards to the commercial areas, there's 4 different areas. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what those areas are. How they're generally structured is an overview of identifying what the area is, prior planning efforts for that particular area, some existing photos and a mapping effort, community input and survey results, as well as a photo of community actually being part of the process, and sticky notes, and bringing that all together into a consolidated map, which is really the 3rd page at the bottom left, sort of consolidate all the ideas that we heard and are appropriate for this area. So this combines the prior planning efforts with the feedback we received from the public, and then it ends with a series of quotes that what we're hearing from the public verbatim, as well as a series of strategies for each corridor. With regards to the downtown area, it focuses on centralizing parking where they exist. They can stay surface parking or be structured parking, but continuing to keep it downtown where it is and away from streets. There's plenty of opportunity sites, especially at corners. The detail place, the gas station, are opportunities for redevelopment or at least some rehab improvements. One of the key things here is obviously support the extension of the Greenway and the future park at Trailhead Park, Municipal County. So this is an opportunity to really extend it and create more green space. If you recall, during the Middlesex County is working with Conrail trying to extend that. Slow moving, but the idea is that this future Middlesex Greenway, since it's so wide, could actually become like a linear park as opposed to just a trail system. And there's other, especially at street corners, there's opportunities for infill development or rehab, and really improve sidewalk conditions and really the need for more street trees throughout the downtown area. In addition to that, there's opportunities. This is the in-place lot on the right in the orange, the salmon color really. That's really based on the efforts from the Missing Middle Gentle Density Guide. So this is where we're thinking there might be an opportunity for missing middle housing, as well as improving buffers between the mixed use and commercial areas and residential areas. We've identified that's a problem, like for example, behind the Friendlies lot. For the Metuchen Arts District, most of this is really spoken for in the redevelopment plan, which is the area in blue. A lot of public feedback about preserving the existing green space in the middle of the Arnault Brothers and Victorian office rental properties. That's certainly a worthy effort right behind the, excuse me, right behind on Wernick and Calvin Place. And that might be an opportunity to control, make sure stormwater runoff doesn't go into the rear of the American Legion building. Surrounding the art district, there's opportunities for more infill sites by virtue of the existing zoning that exists today. We're not suggesting taller buildings or more density. This is by virtue of existing zoning, especially at the gas station at the corner. That was a comment we received, like, what's with the gas station at the corners? They're all vacant and ugly. So we certainly validate that. On Halsey Street, there's a series of single and two-family homes, which are all not permitted. So the idea here is just permit them, rezone its properties and avoid. I think there was actually a zoning board application just last week, a couple of weeks ago, for someone on Halsey Street. Of course, with the reconstructed theater, there's an opportunity for a pedestrian plaza across Main Street to kind of connect to the future redevelopment across the street. For South Main Street, this was actually an area that LRK studied and the borough adopted as part of its land use plan back in 2002, 2003. So with that information and background research and with community input, what we're looking at, this is a simple corridor, so it's not as big. So the Main Street project goes through this area. There will be a new traffic light at Brunswick and Myrtle. Again, another corner gas station. The idea is like this is like your entrance to town, so this needs to be a focus on like upgrading. There's other infill opportunities at corners as well as a supercars lot and the opportunity for missing middle housing on the vacant lots in South Main Street. And of course, with all this, improving the buffers between those areas as well as the residential areas, since they're so like right on top of each other. There's an opportunity for preserving either the taxidermy place as either an infill or rehab, and with the corner perhaps being a green space. And that's because this neighborhood has a lack of green space. Central Avenue, there's sort of I'll call it a twofold approach here. On the top of the page is really the east side. There's already a group of 2 and 3 families as well as a commercial building. This is where the Hatch used to be, and now Maria's Brunch, I believe it is. So this is the sort of mixed use area, but it's zoned R2. All those uses are non-conforming. So the idea is that what if this becomes permitted, all those types of uses, and do the same on the other stretch of between West Chestnut and Midland Avenue. On the west side, consideration infill development, really bring buildings closer to the street, really the parking lots behind the buildings, and probably the biggest thought process here is to do a road diet on Central Avenue. It's such a wide road, cars are driving by really quickly. Even with the new crosswalk with the lighted signal, it's a dangerous crossing because of how fast traffic is going. And there's also other opportunities for really connecting Central Avenue to green spaces, including potentially to the Greenway, if that were to consider, as well as preserving this green space as alluded to in the Middlesex Greenway Future Extension Plan from 2010. For the Southwest Gateway, this is primarily looking at preserving the ability to have that interchange that we've been long discussing. The Wawa project indicated for preserving it, so the idea is this will be preserved and there's some sort of infill opportunity behind it. We don't know what that might be. It doesn't have to be infill. It might just be a detention basin from the state. We just don't know. But this could be something. That would mean that High Street is probably going to be cut off, and we have to really think about what's going to happen to the future of the lots behind the Honda building as well as the Franco Manufacturing building. As I indicated earlier, having a warehouse and other light industrial uses may not be appropriate in certain areas, and this is one of them. You have to drive through a residential neighborhood to get to that light industrial area. So this might be an opportunity to think about preserving some trees as green space, as well as some sort of infill opportunity, whether it's community service based or it could be a larger missing middle housing opportunity or a planned unit residential development. And of course, along the frontage of Route 27, really reconstruct that streetscape, especially in front of the office building and a car wash. With regards to the proposed land use, so you'll see that on this map, not much is changing, and that's intentional. What we're trying to do is reinforce the community fabric of the compact center and residential edges, and we're trying not to redo the land use plan. This is unlike, say, I think it was a 1967 master plan, or it might have been 1959 master plan. They were anticipating Metuchen's population would be 18,000 by 1970. It did not happen, but they had recommended at that time that the area east of downtown up to Rector Street become medium density housing. That did not happen for good measure. Now the focus is keep the density downtown where it belongs by transit. With regards to the actual land use goals, what you'll see is if you were to review the prior 1967 policy statements, and they've rolled through as the objectives and goals through the 1988 reexamination leading up to 2016, you'll see that this is more of a repackaging of the existing goals into more concise terms. So these are the recommendations, the goals related to land use to continue to provide a variety of housing types, preserve and enhance residential character, maintain involved community identity, preserve the compact, viable downtown, guide context-sensitive infill, and focus growth in appropriate locations, which is primarily downtown, and supporting economic viability, as well as modernizing land use standards. There is a long list of specific recommendations that I'm not going to repeat verbatim since it goes on for several pages, but this is sort of the playbook. I'll call it perhaps an action plan. You'll notice this plan doesn't have an action plan. We have short, medium, and long-term goals. The way we structure this master plan is that these are all actionable goals in the short term, and try to just focus on the next 10 years, but also thinking about what the borough might look like in 50 years. So a lot of these recommendations pertain to, I'll just go over just a couple of them. They relate to continue to update the permitted uses and do more housekeeping, clarifying site plan thresholds for really easier zoning administration, updating standards for parking regulations and accessibility, supporting third places and destinations, creating an inclusive design and community access checklists, reevaluating the business height standards. So 35 feet is really short for a 3-story building with mixed use. 40 feet would be more appropriate. And actually was 45 feet recommended in the 2014 amendment. So this is sort of bring it down to 40 feet, which was more appropriate, but still not go above the National Bank building. Other recommendations include conducting a market study to understand businesses and really support the MDA, and then modernizing your light industrial uses. And one of the key recommendations as part of this master plan is doing illustrated design guidelines. So we talk a lot about how, Chris, what do you think? Well, if we're trying to have more of an administrative approach where the zoning official could be empowered to approve minor changes to the site, we need improved design guidelines for commercial and mixed-use buildings. That way there's guidance both for administration staff as well as providing predictability for developers when they come into Metuchen. Other illustrated design standards include a signage ordinance. I'm working on a signage ordinance in Princeton where we're illustrating through models and photos what we mean when we talk about the signage ordinance. And of course, a form-based code. Metuchen already has a form-based code light, I'll call it, with regards to pushing the garage back and having the porch come forward and all that. All those standards, but what my recommendation would be to do what Princeton and Highland Park did was to illustrate them so it's more clear and strengthen them so that new housing fits in better into residential neighborhoods. With regards to the zoning map recommendations, obviously we need to digitize them and make it more user-friendly, and that's going to be easier for administrative staff as well as for the public to understand where they are, because if you try to read that black and white map, you don't know where you are because you have to look at tax maps first. You got to make sure you're in the right lot, and then you might get it wrong because you're just missing a district. So the idea is to update and digitize the map, add all the redevelopment areas, missing districts, and just boundaries in accordance to the already adopted regulations. We're not suggesting any changes per se yet. There are opportunities to eliminate overlay districts which are no longer needed because, for example, the Emergency Services Center is already being built with on a lot that was for affordable housing, but that housing has now been relocated in other areas as part of this 4th round plan. So that overlay, for example, is no longer needed. Like we discussed before, rezoning the Hollister Street lots, and then there's opportunities which will require much further study and deliberation, is to look at the updating zoning standards for certain residential neighborhoods. For example, the radio section, Charles Street, West Walnut. Those are much narrower lots, so you may want to think about rezoning that to a different district with the right size lot width requirements and heights so the housing fits in better. And then also think about areas where it may be appropriate to expand where 2 families allowed. Not to take away single family, but to add opportunities for 2 family. But with that, we need design standards to make sure the 2 family fits into the neighborhood. Because it is a little odd when you have a home with a detached garage, single family, but then you have a large 2-family home with garages in front. It's definitely a mixed match. So that is the conclusion of the land use plan, but part of that is also the climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment. This was as indicated before, required by state law to do an assessment. And we utilize the Guide to Local Climate Change Adaptation Planning, which is a guide developed by New Jersey Future and Sustainable Jersey, and we received technical assistance from Sustainable Jersey to develop this standard. What we're doing here is to analyze the spatial hazards, which includes flooding and wildfire, meaning areas that you can map, with non-spatial hazards, meaning things you can't map, but are hazards, which includes extreme heat, drought, and severe weather. So what does climate change mean in Metuchen? So what was great about the technical assistance that they gave us the background information about how it's specific, not just to New Jersey or a region, but to Metuchen. So the climate hazard scans, which at the bottom of the page shows that increased temperatures will range between almost 4 to 9 degrees, more frequent and prolonged heat waves, more precipitation, and a continued rise in intensity and frequency of storms. And this is grounded through executive action in 2019. The governor signed a executive order to compel the state to develop a scientific study. 2021, the amendment to the municipal land use law was adopted, which is why we're doing a CCRHVA. It looks like I spelled that wrong. And then they updated the scientific report in 2025 with some additional data. One of the first things the CCR-HVA requires us to do is identify built facilities and infrastructure. That includes municipal facilities, bridges, train station, including EV at gas stations, because when the power's out, you need a way to move around. You need the fuel, whether it's battery or a combustion engine. Also, community assets and contaminated sites. We overlay that information with the what you see in gray are the 100-year floodplain, and the lighter gray is not well rendered, but this is the projected floodplain, which is 3 feet above the existing floodplain. You'll see that this encroaches closer to Central Avenue, which is a concern in the northwest quadrant. Less so in the southeast quadrant, but may affect properties on Marsh Avenue, but certainly does affect the park space. So these are just the floodplain information that's given us through FEMA, and then the Rutgers helped us with the 3-foot rise in the floodplain. But what about flash flooding? So part of the community survey was identifying areas where you see flooding, because these are things that cannot be mapped. And it was interesting seeing a big bullseye on the train right underneath the trestle. Of course it is. And really it's underneath all bridges under the Northeast Corridor, as well as on pockets of Central Avenue in the radius section, which we thought was interesting. So we looked at we did our other mapping and try to figure out what that might mean, where that might come from. So this is an impervious coverage map, and we chose red on purpose. It was scary. So the darker red means it's high impervious coverage. So, I believe it's 81 to 100%. So almost entirely impervious. So when you have that condition, water sheet flows and has no place to go. We also looked at the topographic information just to understand where water is flowing from sheet flow. Obviously, you have Beacon Hill, Hillside, Raleigh Court, and the Woodwild Park are the high points, and there's this ridge that's sort of formed from the northeast to the southwest, and water goes into the opposite directions. When we combine that with the knowledge that the radius section in Central Avenue has really a lack of stormwater sewer pipes, that's why you're seeing water ponding in streets. And then we have downstream issues where the pipes have sediment and so on. But it's been addressed through some redevelopment projects with regards to Whole Foods and the Oakite site and Colton property, trying to clear out that line that connects from downtown to the Dismal Swamp, Dismal Brook. Other than flooding, we look at wildfire. Generally, we have low risk. These are not meant to be scary. This is actually this level, I believe it's 3 out of 10. That's 10 categories. So Metuchen has very, very low risk, but it's limited to the highly vegetated areas by the St. Joe's High School, as well as in the Peter J. Barnes Wildlife Reserve. But no critical facilities are in this area. Factors that exacerbate fire risk include prolonged droughts, sustained high temperatures, like today, and tree loss. Because when there's tree loss, that means the ground cover is exposed to more heat, and that creates more fuel, which will create a fire risk. And of course, human activity, smoking, and uncontrolled fires. With regard to non-spatial hazards, we went through the analysis, which we found interesting. I find this personally interesting, and I've been showing this in presentations at conferences. So we retrieved data from the state about the tree canopy coverage in 2013. You notice then some subtle changes to 2023. So a 10-year span, you'll say, it's still green, but you'll notice that the area behind the Whole Foods was cleared, and that's partly because the development went up to the wood's edge and it's cleared. And you'll see that some parts of the Peter J. Barnes Wildlife Reserve is not as dense and green, and that's partly due to clearing and removing invasive species and whatnot. When you look at the change, you'll see all those changes in red, that those are the tree loss. Not much green, but a lot of yellow. So you look at yellow and think, well, not much change, that must be a good thing. But if you look back, there's not many trees there to begin with. So don't be fooled by all the yellow. We need to do more with trees. Regards to land surface temperatures, this is data from, I believe it's July of 2022 or 2023, when the ambient temperature was 90 degrees. And you can see the hot spots can get up to 135, 140 degrees. This happens to be the roof of the large warehouse on Leonard Street, and you can see there's still some hot spots downtown. And that's partly due because of the lack of tree cover. And when you overlay the two, it's pretty clear, there's a clear relationship between lack of tree cover and land temperatures. So that has driven a lot of recommendations in this master plan. This is unlike other communities that have to deal with sea level rise and flooding. So these are sort of unique issues to Metuchen, which is the whole point of the effort. So I identify what those issues are, what recommendations you can make, and how they can be incorporated into your land use. So the 5 goals related to climate change resilience is expand your tree canopy in urban forestry, reduce impervious coverage. What I found surprising, just a couple residents, not speaking for everybody, but a few residents came up to me and said, I think we need to reduce impervious coverage. I was surprised to hear that, and that will help improve cooling. Manage stormwater runoff and build flood resilience, so working with our consultants to really map our stormwater pipes and upgrade them where needed, ideally with grant funding. Strengthening our infrastructure and planning, so really think about flooding, tree canopy with land use planning, and formalizing municipal coordination and leadership, which could be by virtue of a green team, which I think the borough is now spearheading. With regards to the other plan elements, so this is recreation, open space, we're not doing housing, community facilities, utility service, circulation, and historic preservation. Again, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, this master plan effort is really looking at land use and a climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment with an overview and reaffirming the goals and objectives, all other elements. So you'll see that those sections in the report are much shorter, and that's intentional. It's basically giving you the framework. If you were to update those plan elements individually, you have some additional information to work with. With regards to the recreation open space, we highlighted some efforts that the borough had achieved through the green print. This is coming out of the pandemic, recognizing how important our open spaces were for community life, and as really get out of the house and still interact with people within 6 feet. And we had the ideas of really upgrading our parks, and the borough has done an amazing job to upgrade them all. Not all, but most of them, which is an amazing effort just in the past 5 years. And that includes the Galton site, where now the Kempson's been constructed and is being occupied. This included the restoration of the Dismal Brook, as well as the creation of about 20 or plus 30 acres of open space. Now the largest open space in Metuchen, which is the Peter J. Barnes III Wildlife Reserve, which includes trails and access, includes a driveway and a parking area for public access, and then more opportunities for open space. And of course, more recently, improvements are proposed for the Trailhead Park through the county. Some maps that we included in the report, there's a lot of land natural layer information that included in the report, which I'm not going to go over again because they are really repetitive from the climate change analysis. I'm just going to focus on these 2 maps. So this is an update of the green spaces and open spaces in Metuchen. But what we did here is we overlaid the proximity of lots from those open spaces. This may help for future planning of where we may want to locate pocket parks. As Metuchen is built out completely, there's no opportunities for preserving farmland or preserving large areas of treed properties or wooded lots. So this could be used as an opportunity to identify areas where let's try to fill the gap of a park deficiency by locating a pocket park here. So in the future, you may want to overlay borough-owned lots or county-owned lots on top of these areas and try to think about increasing the inventory of open space. With regards to the goals and recommendations, again, this is just a repackaging of the existing goals. For example, you may have 20 goals and it's simplified to 5. So I don't think I really need to go through these in great detail, but they're more or less trying to bring them down to easier bites for a future plan development. With regards to community facilities, this is just an acknowledgement of the community facilities, the Borough Hall, the police and fire station, schools, public and private community centers, public meaning the senior center and Metuchen Pool, private meaning the YMCA, so as well as historic resources. That's done through a separate map or really analysis through the historic preservation plan. We also included the Forum Theater as well as the old Franklin Schoolhouse. This is an analysis of really through a lot of research and interviews with staff as well as other consultants to identify really what's changed in the past 10 years of their facilities. And we're finding the borough and the school district really share their facilities pretty well, so that should be continued. And there's other facilities in the borough that could stand to be upgraded or be better utilized. But as a built-out community, there's less opportunities for that. And so this might serve as a foundation for a future community facilities plan. So we identified 5 goals, which is really looking at long-term community facility needs, and continue to modernize community facilities and improve access to services. That includes digitizing maps, I believe the Gov pilot program through the clerk's office, through improved OPRA management, as well as SDL, which is Spatial Data Logic. The building department and the zoning department are now digitizing their records, and all our records in the basement are being digitized. The idea is that this will be a more efficient use of our systems and allow for public feedback and access. And with regard to those facilities, ensure that they are resilient and multifunctional, especially in hot weather and severe storms, which may include cooling centers, and maintaining the collaboration and shared services that we do have, whether it's with Edison or with the school district, to make sure that it's important in a community like this to continue that relationship. And again, leveraging technology to improve communication. That might include improving the borough website so that way almost all the information that we're looking for is there. FAQ, how-to list. So I think there's opportunities to leverage the technology that we do have, and really improve communication and service delivery. With regard to utility service, this is really looking at the facilities, the utilities that the Metuchen have. These are just maps that show what service you have. And you all know this. You're in a service area. There's really no areas where you don't have sewer service other than the edges of the Peter J. Barnes III Wildlife Reserve. You have, I believe it's PSNG for electric, as well as Elizabethtown Gas for gas. Just the master plan element requires that you identify what those facilities are. Otherwise, the main focus of the utility service plan is to look at stormwater management. I believe the stormwater management plan was last updated in 2021. So there's not much discussion there, although there are more updated stormwater rules coming down the pike. And what we felt was relevant here in terms of land use planning is the recharge area. So this is how much water can be absorbed in the ground. And you'll see that not many areas have great recharge. So we need to think about lowering impervious coverage, but at the same time allow for flexibility. If people want to put a patio and not make them get a variance, but perhaps there's ways to balance lowering impervious coverage with improved green infrastructure on lots. And these are just mainly the same goals from the utility service from the prior master plan effort. Really enhancing stormwater management, improving water quality and natural system function, which is really protecting our natural lands, modernizing our stormwater infrastructure, and making sure our development aligns with capacity. What we're finding, though, is that generally speaking, there is capacity for them. So we just had to make sure that's publicly explained, that even though it looks like a lot of housing is coming down the pike, there is capacity for it. And supporting resilient, efficient, and forward-looking utility systems. With regards to circulation, this was last done in 2009 and with an update in 2016 to include your bike ped plan. What this update looks to do is like thinking beyond looking beyond street design and looking at ways how to design streets, make sure they accommodate people of all ages and abilities, looking at complete streets, Vision Zero planning, transportation demand management, safe streets for all, really try to take advantage of all those programs. We have in the past, but we should continue to do so to really improve our streets. And with regards to the sidewalk inventory, I'm proud of this because I did the first mapping identifying where we had missing sidewalks throughout the entire community back in 2016. This has been updated to show in green the sidewalks that have been added. Not too much, but incremental updates. But you'll see there's lots of areas still in red where we're missing sidewalks. And using the same methodology of doing a heat map of this time to park space as well as school sites, this map could be useful as a tool to identify areas where we want to prioritize sidewalk improvements. Whether it's through, I think for all new homes, the sidewalk has to go in. The question is, should we make homeowners get a sidewalk and put a sidewalk in when there isn't one? And that's been debated. for several years now, but I think the idea is that perhaps we need to focus on more of a borough approach and getting grant funding and other programs to incentivize and really do capital improvements to install sidewalks where they're needed. So this doesn't suggest where the sidewalks should go, but this is used as a tool where they could go, and we can share the mapping between my office and the borough and try to identify perhaps that could be like the next project. With regards to bicycle infrastructure, obviously this is from the 2016 map, and the Grove Avenue bike lane is moving ahead, and there's been recent discussions about perhaps a bicycle lane on Hillside Avenue, but it's been pushed back from the public and reconsideration what that might look like. That being said, the recommendation in this master plan is take a step back and look at this system as holistically and determine where it's appropriate to put your bike lanes. It may very well be the same map, and it very well will be including Hillside Avenue, because Hillside Avenue is a great opportunity to connect the downtown to Grove, to Oakland Park, and to Roosevelt Park. There's a way to connect those two. How that's done, that remains to be seen, and it should be studied. And also, I think this is the last one on circulation. This is the share mobility. The idea is that with car share, bike share, and scooter share, as well as bicycles, e-bikes, although there's now controversy with e-bikes with the state law mandating licensing or registration. However we frame or look at this, the planning consideration is these systems and these mobilities need infrastructure as well, and they need support in planning. So when we look at our sidewalk design and street design, we need to be thinking about these modes of travel as well. With regards to parking management and public EV, what's fortunate for Metuchen as a downtown with a transit station, the residential site improvement standards was recently modified, amended in 2023, where what used to be minimum parking requirements are now maximums. That gives the borough and all municipalities flexibility to consider lowering parking requirements. That doesn't mean every property should be one space per unit. It needs to be thought and studied through. Otherwise, with regards to public EV, we have 5 equipment stations in the parking deck, and there's 2 at the Sportsplex that's available to the public, but there's a need to think about expanding that network, and the focus should be on community facilities owned by the borough or the county, as well as for municipal lots, and we should be encouraging existing already developed townhouse and apartment buildings that predate the regulations to really encourage EV parking infrastructure there. In terms of recommendations, this is a big consolidation of there's many goals and objectives in both the circulation plan as well as the bike ped plan. So this simplifies into 5 goals to focus on improving safe and reliable mobility, enhancing the connections, both with regards to transit as well as regional destinations, managing parking better, and dealing with, again, we've all seen this on Main Street lately, the double parking and delivery services. That needs to be looked at, as well as supporting our neighborhoods, which may include residential-only parking or expanding that. So that needs to be studied as a global level. And generally, the goal is to reduce traffic impacts in neighborhoods. Unfortunately, we have a pretty restrictive circulation network. We have a train line that cuts off where you can access or cross different sides of town. So it's tough. And plus, we're inside Edison, which has grown by 60% in the last 50 years. And then, again, strengthening connectivity between neighborhoods and key destinations like parks and schools in the downtown area. With regards to historic preservation, this was just adopted, the plan element was just adopted in 2021, so this is really just a copy and paste, literally, just with improved formatting and photographs. What this does, though, is we did a historic preservation survey to identify what was the community feedback about what the next step might be. And what we're finding is that historic preservation is still an important goal, and it should be a planning priority. However, there's this sort of a mismatch between what that looks like. Is it preservation of all old buildings, even though they may not be historic? There's also concerns about new homes being put in, but there's other standards and other regulations that can deal with new infill housing. What we did was we took this information back, and what we determined was that the borough's residents need more clarification of how exactly a historic preservation ordinance works. And that we need to probably start from scratch and really think about, work with the community and explain how exactly it works. We also need to think about improved education, which should be first, and it should be practical. It needs to be clearly understood. And if the borough were to consider adopting a historic preservation commission, it should, before that, consider refining its inventory, because what is in your inventory in a master plan now has implications on how it's regulated later. But you'll see the current inventory includes properties from the 1990 survey. That might not be appropriate for the properties you're trying to regulate if you were to regulate through historic preservation. And incentives should be part of that strategy, which include like the ways to lower fees or have some sort of rehabilitation funds for some neighborhood access. And there's other ways to do that, many different tools to broaden and strengthen community character. So the goals for historic preservation is, again, taking the existing goals and just consolidating into 5. These have not changed much other than strengthening public education about what that next step might look like, and before we go into a potential ordinance. This is the last part of the plan required by law to state where our relationship is to Edison Township. Fortunately, we only have to do one town since we're a donut hole. Middlesex County, the state plan, and the solid waste management plan. Generally speaking, the borough's master plan as proposed, and even prior to its 2016 and prior, are generally consistent with the Edison Township, Middlesex County state plan. In fact, the state plan looks at Metuchen's really model as development approach as a model for recentering growth to the downtown. The reexamination report, I'll be brief with this. So this was a simple report explaining all the changes that have occurred in the past 10 years only. So there's a lot of repetition and overlap between all the prior discussions. But generally speaking, what we did here, this gave us an opportunity to look back to 1959 and see how the master plans changed up to 2023, or really 25 with the housing plan, in preparation for this plan. And what we're finding is that it's generally, the reexamination report has 6 objectives. The first one is to identify the problems that were identified in the last reexamination report. What this means is literally going back to the prior plans and saying this was the recommendation and the goal. So we just repeat that incorporation by reference. For B, we'll be looking at how has that changed in the past 10 years. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how land use, recreation, open space, housing has changed, including demographics. So that's incorporated by reference. So it's changed, but Metuchen maintains its compact core. And the letter C is the significant changes to assumption policies. This is looking at local, county, and state level changes. So what we did was we did an analysis of all your redevelopment actions that you've taken. Prior to 2016, you did an area needs study for the Firehouse, Galton, and Oak Height. That's all you did as of 2016. Since then, you've done 15 actions, including redevelopment plans as well as other studies. And that's being incorporated into the master plan. There's been a number of ordinance updates, about over a couple dozen, and they're mostly related to housing enforcement regards to the 3rd and 4th rounds, as well as housekeeping to the land development ordinance to really regulate single-family dwellings and updating permitted uses. So this is a look back, what has changed. No commentary, just listing what has changed. When we got to the state level, I had several pages of all the statutory changes at the state level. There was plenty. And it was a useful exercise because it might help us inform the codification effort for the borough's ordinances, as well as educating staff about the changes that we need to be aware of. E is the incorporation of redevelopment plans. So this is the recommendation. Excuse me. I'm actually going to go back to D. So this is the specific changes recommended for the plan and regulations. That's all done through the land use plan that we spoke about earlier in the presentation. And the goals and objectives are repeated here in reference for a reexamination report. This is more relevant when you only do a reexamination report and don't update the master plan. So there's a lot of redundancy here. For E, it's the incorporation. What's the planning board's recommendation on redevelopment plans? We're simply incorporating it by reference. We should updating your zoning maps to show those redevelopment areas. And when those properties are actually developed and completed, you may need to think about updating your zoning ordinance and zoning map to show the built condition. And F, this is, again, repetitious because the state was trying to encourage public EV, so they put it both in the master plan as well as the reexamination report requirements. Locations appropriate for public EV, and we already discussed that, considering more public facilities, parks, municipal lots, and encouraging private developments such as townhouse and apartment communities to encourage them to build that infrastructure for those residents that live there. And that's it. That's the conclusion of this very long presentation. Thank you.
Good. Okay. I'm sure there's just many questions from board members who are dying to jump right in and ask them, so I'm going to start with that.
I'll go.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you for the presentation. Quite extensive, as you said, and the report itself is how many pages? 380 pages? Very difficult for even a board member to get through, let alone a member of the public. So thank you for that lengthy description. A few things that you discussed that I wanted to ask you about. You discussed potentially de-emphasizing light industrial in certain areas of the borough. Was there a review of what that would mean to the tax base, to the tax burden for residential owners? And I'll start with that.
No, that would be part of the analysis. If you were to consider changing the permitted uses in those districts, that should be part of the analysis. That's why it's not a concrete recommendation like you must do this. So it's evaluation of whether that should be done. And like any zoning changes, that should be studied for the market impact to the community.
Okay, so you would consider this purely an aspirational document? You don't
Yes.
feel it has any real-world application, that these are just sort of ethereal things that consultants came up with? Is that?
I would say that's accurate. Most master plans are approached in that direction. The only difference is in the land use plan, you'll see there's very specific items because that's a result of talking to staff and board and commission committees, or really easy changes that be made over the next 10 years. Otherwise, there's plenty of goals, especially when you look at the commercial corridors and even when discussion on middle housing, that's more of an aspirational that requires more research.
Okay, so as this is an aspirational document, would it be a place to put our aspirations regarding our relationship with state agencies? In other words, we're talking about light industrial uses and how that could be detrimental to residential areas. We've talked about literally for decades the fact that trucks need to traverse Metuchen to get onto 287 because of the missing ramp. Is this a place to put that in the master plan about our aspiration for that, or is that just completely dead?
Yeah, we mentioned that in the Southwest Gateway commercial area, it's continued to cooperate with state agencies as well as the developer of the Wawa property to ensure that happens.
Okay, but we've been cooperating with state agencies for 50 years, and cooperation hasn't really gotten us anything.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just jump in. We had a meeting about this yesterday.
Okay.
It's not a meeting that, it was a meeting with the state officials, it was a meeting with the Wawa developers, so it is current. And
Okay.
and Mr. Cosenza wouldn't know that necessarily because he wasn't on the call.
All right, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So in discussing cooperation with state agencies, and you mentioned your collaboration with New Jersey Transit about their help and their desire for gentle density, and from their perspective to generate additional ridership on New Jersey Transit. Was there any discussion? I think there has been discussion about potentially enlarging or improving the Metuchen train station and waiting room. Is that something that we might consider putting in this document as an aspirational wish?
So that was not part of the gentle density report. That's a different infrastructure. I don't recall if it's mentioned in this report, but you can certainly add in a recommendation that we added in your resolution to continue to support that.
Okay, and when you talk about gentle density, are we sure that that's really what the public is wanting? Increased density in, not necessarily, now you talked about the downtown areas, certainly, but two-family houses. What I see as just a resident is quite a bit of residents' concerns has to do with knockdowns and subdivisions. You could describe that as increasing gentle density if you wanted to, and that seems to be a tremendous concern in the community. So how do you define gentle density when people are concerned about people taking larger lots with large older houses, knocking them down and subdividing them? Because that would seem to fit the definition of gentle density.
Right. So as indicated in the master plan, there needs to sort of a twofold approach. It's not just a matter of just increased density for the sake of it. It's also relooking at your zoning standards to ensure whatever development occurs, no matter what the use is, fits into the neighborhood. and right-sizing the parking regulations and locating those types of uses closer to transit. Again, just like with everything else that's aspirational, it requires further study. I think the professionals did a great job showing what they could be, but it requires more research and study on our part to really advance it further. There's no silver bullet to try to figure out what that might look like, at least tonight, but it does certainly require further study.
I think that what I've heard and seen is, obviously, we've had some large development projects in the borough over the last few years. There were very good reasons for doing them. We had land that was either, as in the case of Galton, contaminated and could not be redeveloped without a large project. We had the Pearl Street lot, which was underutilized, and those projects, while generating some concern in the public, I hope, I'm certainly was in favor of them. I think they're largely accepted, and I think they're wonderful additions in the case of Woodmont, and certainly Galton is just coming online. But those increased density, I think, from my perspective, was needed. But again, I'm just going to state, I'm not sure that increasing the density in marginal residential areas is necessarily, I'm just one person, but I can read a Facebook post like anybody else. I'm not necessarily sure that, and you would have to show me, if you wanted to convince me, where in the feedback, in the surveys, it says that people want increased density in residential areas. I'm not quite sure that follows from what I've seen as a relatively long-term resident, and from my position, I was on the school board for many years. It's not really the way I've seen the public react to these sorts of things. So if that's going to be in the document, and it's an aspiration of the community, I don't know if that actually is an aspiration of the community. So my concern there. Talking about historic preservation, and potentially, I know very potentially, a commission or an ordinance to control historic properties. Again, I know this is, it's aspirational. Is there in fact a consensus in the community that people want properties to be regulated and controlled? I'm not sure. Not sure if that's true. So if this is an aspirational document, it should codify the actual aspirations of the residents of Metuchen. I'm not 100% sure it really does that. I'm not sure the surveys, at least that I've seen, really support that. Now, these are not ordinances, this isn't implementing anything. But if it's going to guide development over the next 10 years in Metuchen, I think it should reflect the actual opinion of the residents of Metuchen, not necessarily consultants or Rutgers or New Jersey Transit, but the actual residents of Metuchen. And that leads me to the bike lanes. We had a pretty large kerfuffle, if I can use that word, regarding the potential bike lanes on Hillside. I think we have to be very careful to include residents who are impacted by the decisions of certainly the Borough Council. Now, I'm not an elected person from the Borough Council. We have the mayor, he's elected. Other members of the Borough Council are elected. We're not elected, so certainly they represent the wants and needs through their electoral mandate that I don't, and other members of the planning board don't, or appointed. But I think it illustrates that pushback, and to bring up a bit of a sore subject from a few years ago, the potential closing of New Street. I think we should all be careful where our aspirations from high don't meet the needs and aspirations of the people who actually live in the areas and own historic properties that don't necessarily want to be regulated, that have driveways and parking that may be impacted by a bike lane that they don't necessarily want. that a little humility sometimes is useful, and especially when you're dealing with people's property in their lives. So that's all I would say. Again, this is an aspirational document. It doesn't enact anything. It's not an ordinance. It's supposed to represent the aspirations of the community, and I just hope that it actually does in these areas. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay. All the members of the board want to talk to Chris, ask him questions, make comments about his presentation? Okay.
I would like to say, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Who went first?
the first thing I wanted to say is thank you. I know how much time and effort you put into this. I know how many people you talked to. I know the hours you spent writing and researching and collating all the data that you received from the 3 different surveys. So I just wanted to say we appreciate your effort in doing that work. One of the questions I keep getting is, from people through email is, these ordinances are being enacted and we haven't been consulted. And I guess I just wanted to reiterate what you said, which is this is a framework for us to work within to make future decisions about land use. And nothing in this plan is changing ordinances or zoning. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to underline that because I've gotten so many questions about that in the past couple days.
It's a common concern. All the communities I've worked in, that is a valid concern. It's just a misunderstanding of the process, which is not often done in this setting, which is why it was important for me when I proposed the original contract for doing this master plan, that this was the community's master plan. I included getting extensive community input. It'll never be a perfect process, but we did put an effort to get the community's input in developing this plan.
Okay, we have another question at the end.
Oh, sure. Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. It is, rightfully quite focused on functional and physical built environment aspects, but it was really nice to see, issues of diversity, cultural aspects, social determinants of health. I mean, it's very comprehensive that way. So I was also very pleased to see quite a bit of focus on housing affordability, because that is, kind of required in a sense. But again, speaking from the viewpoint of residents and people, affordability is a very big issue, and not just with housing, right? I mean, with transportation, with food, with healthcare, social care, all of that stuff. And secondly, the idea of accessibility. I mean, we talked about circulation issues, transportation issues, but not necessarily accessibility in the sense of accessibility to jobs. I mean, the framework document really talked about the spatial distribution of jobs and the labor market as a given, not something that we can impact. So I was hoping to see more of a flow in the document and not take some of these big things like, spatial distribution, geographical distribution of jobs or food sources, all of these things as static, immutable constants, but something we can really make a change in through collaboration, business strategies, and so on and so forth. So stop right there, but I think it was a great job, and I was very pleased to see the wide, comprehensive range.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Mayor, did you want to?
Yeah, I don't want to share too much. I'm other than just express my appreciation to Mr. Cosenza and the team who worked their tails off. In some ways, what Ms. Koskowski said about her question that was raised with respect to I don't want to say lack of understanding, but there was definitely a misunderstanding, as there would be for something that's so rare and something that's not typically in the public dialogue, but is required to be done. So on one hand, you do everything you can as an elected, as an appointed official, as a member of the community, to engage the public and get as much input as possible. But the amount of work it took for your team to do that, and I know some of them are here tonight, was really extraordinary. I mean, the efforts that were undertaken to do that, and that's not the kind of thing necessarily that's possible. That pace can't necessarily be kept up by your elected, your appointed, by your community in general. So I don't know that this is a question, but it's an issue that I keep thinking about as it relates to this master plan. You know, we want community engagement. We want community involvement. We want, and we saw this, some of the people are here today, more people to regularly show up at our council meetings. You know, that's real, because how do you know, as Mr. Lifton said, right? How do you know what people really want? You don't want to read Facebook necessarily to determine that. I mean, people stop me on Main Street or wherever I am. I'm getting my hair cut, people talk to me. I mean, it's just the way this town works. But how do you really know what people want? And even when people do show up at a council meeting, is it just the people who are particularly concerned about an issue? I mean, we had a council meeting with, I don't know, 40, 50 people here a couple of weeks ago, months ago. Since then, the combination of people that have been here haven't even added up to that total number. And then we've had 3 or 4 council meetings since then. So, you know, it's really, really hard to figure out what people want. But when you make these concerted efforts like you all did highly successfully and admirably from my perspective, we appreciate it. And it's great. But it's really hard to figure out the answers to some of these inquiries. How do you figure out what this community wants? We sit here and we try aspirationally to understand. And as was also clear during that meeting that we had about bike lanes, I'm not picking on the bike lane issue particularly, but it's a good example. You know, we thought about it, we considered it, we ran into a couple what we thought were just turns that turned into roadblocks. And it took the council and me to sort of say, you know what, this isn't the right direction for us. But those are not easy determinations to make. I think the public in Metuchen understands that. This is a much more nuanced citizenry than some of my colleagues have in their other communities. But this is complicated stuff. So this document is incredibly important, but ripe with misunderstanding, understandably, because of the nature of what it is. So it's just one of those things. And, you know, I don't know that I have any more clarity on it now than I did before the master plan, but I'm glad we have a master plan, and it's so important to get right.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is that we've done a lot of community engagement through the science fair method, whether it's for the, in 2006, D1 district, trying to figure out what would happen downtown. Green print prior to the reveal of the Kempson, the Colton project, the Metuchen Arts District. We used that as a model for what this master plan should be, because when looking back on it through the file, what we found was that really the last comprehensive master plan was 1967. And it was important to me, and thankfully to the borough council, administration, and planning board, that we need to have that level of effort for this particular master plan, because it's just been re-examination reports, just maybe 20 pages of text, 1988, 94, 2000, 2006, 2016. It was time to refresh and update it. And I do appreciate the feedback on the community engagement. It is hard. You won't reach everybody. You won't have consensus. In some cases, you don't. You'll notice that the reason reads as aspirational, because in some cases we're walking on eggshells, because it's not clear what the direction should be. And that includes the bike lane and historic preservation. And that's why I try to make a concerted effort, first of all, not to avoid the hard questions and the difficult issues. It's important that we discuss them. And it's important to acknowledge that there's still work that needs to be done. And sometimes you got to take a step back and improve communication, feedback. Sometimes you have to slow it down a little bit. And that's why I had that approach to the historic preservation. I think there may be consensus for historic preservation, but there's a misinformation about how that might work. For example, it can't just have a demolition only ordinance. It can't. You have to think about what that is. You have to explain it to the public how that works. And you got to really think about, if we have an ordinance, what properties do they apply to? That's never been clear throughout this effort.
Yeah, and this is not a set it. I mean, I think is what the most important thing to take away from this for us, for the council, for the community. This is not a set it and forget it document. This is a guideline. It's a vision plan. You know, it's a aspirational vision plan. And you're in the intervening period between now and when this is done again, whether it's a intermediate step or whatever the future holds, whatever person is in my spot, and all your seats at that point will decide sort of how to proceed. The council will decide how to proceed. But, all along the way, the community is electing its officials to make the decisions on the ordinances, to decide who is appointed to the planning board, to decide, all these, I should say, through their elected officials. And you're making these decisions, but, it's important, but it's also nothing is set in stone. So it's like it's a
Right. That's
mixed
why
bag
it's
in that regard.
not uncommon to have a master plan amendment to reflect certain changes that happen between your 10-year period.
Other members? Okay, before I open it up to the public, I'll throw my 2 cents in there. If you've been on this board for any length of time, you know the mediocrity we've suffered through in the last 2 to 3 years. Applications coming in poorly planned, very generic, don't answer the questions that the public has concerns about the, the context of their neighborhood, and how frustrated many board members have been about why don't we do more to make it specific to the developer, what it is that the board seeks to approve, so that we don't have to go through this process. And part of what Chris did in this plan was actually flesh some of that out, not to codify it, but to say, okay, maybe we need to do tiny homes in this particular area of the borough because affordability is a concern. We look at the radio district and we see tear downs and stuffing the envelope. There's a lot of very difficult questions. And if it were easy, we have consensus on this already. I think the mayor throwing a wide net at the beginning. I remember May of last year, the mayor leading off a group of stakeholders and saying, okay, everybody, this is where we begin, right? It's a really, really tough nut to crack, but everybody tried to put your head together. I think of the amount of public visioning sessions that you guys have held. Linda, with council president also, having participated in the 2006 master plan reexamination when Jim Conson and I sat at the senior center, and this was before the invention of smartphones and social media, and we were just trying to get anybody to come in and talk about what we might want. I have to say, the sheer volume of input from the public I see in this master plan is just absolutely wonderfully overwhelming. I mean, there's more responses than there is population on multiple occasions. And there's definitely disagreement. Some people are saying, hey, I think some of this recent development is a little too intense, Others talk about affordability. I think that what really Chris has done just a masterful job of is taking this enormous volume of information and trying to distill it into its, coherent tenets. What are the things that going forward we should be looking at and perhaps wanting to change? So on a planning board level, I'd love to see what we're going to do to make it such that development and infill development is what the community wants, right? And we've argued for years whether that's floor area ratios or form-based codes, right? But Chris got us closer to starting to put down graphically in this master plan reexamination some of the ways that might manifest. And I appreciate it because I got to tell you, I'm very frustrated with the, what we've all put our time into trying to do the very best job we could for the community. But the vagueness of it, and it's hard to legislate taste, right? How do you, tell someone what they can do with their home and what color they should paint it? If this was easy, it would already be resolved. What I think we have, and Chris, the very first thing you said when the mayor let us off last year, your very first thing was all master plans have talked about the residential character. And you said, is that still relevant in 2025, now 2026? And what I got from your report was that they really do, but they call it something else. So what we consider residential character, I would say the residents consider community, right? They want to come and live in Metuchen because it feels like a community. And what does that mean? And you touched on many different things, having, meeting spaces outside that are not, they could be parks. There is so much potential. But I think the bottom line is at the end of the day, from this hopefully will come some practical changes. And that will be probably through the governing body codifying things. But at least at the end of the day, you see there was an enormous amount of public input and a lot of things. I don't know how you did it, quite honestly. I always hold Jim Constantine as the gold standard, but pal, I think you outdid him on this one. So while there's no definitive answer, I do think it asks some great questions. And remember, it's not we're not codifying it, it's a mission statement. That's what this is, right? How do we do the very best for the citizens of Metuchen? Okay, that's my soapbox deal. Ellen, you got anything?
No, I just, again, want to reaffirm all the comments that the board has made. Again, thank you, Chris, for an outstanding job and for everybody who did work on the master plan. I think it's important to note going forward that we don't take this plan and put it on a shelf, because that's what usually happens. Tremendous job, and it's completed, and then it's left. So I think maybe at every hearing, we have a hard copy of the master plan out here, so everyone sees it. And while even statutorily, there are requirements that an applicant refer to the master plan and how maybe their application jives with it or supports it, I think we really have to give more thought and deliberation to applications that do come before us, and really do consider how they either conflict or support the views that have been incorporated in the master plan itself. And I think that's worthy of discussion at every application that we hear. And maybe that's how we can, again, move forward in a positive direction. Not to have everyone agree, but to make sure that the consideration that's given is done in a fair and equitable way.
You're here. Okay, anybody else hasn't been heard from that would like to? Okay, I think we've gotten everybody. Why don't we open it up to the public now? You remember the public, you have a, Bob, do you want to do questions and statements separately, or?
No, we're going to have a public hearing. We'd like to have everybody who wants to say something come up. Please state your full name and your address. It's not necessary that we swear people in, so please feel free to come up and make comments if you wish.
Okay, I'm looking, oh, I see some, there we go, we have someone coming.
Carol Savage, 59 Carson Avenue.
I forgot, you're already following the instruction. No, we're not going to swear you in. You have
I
to
didn't
talk
think
into the
that's where I'm not an
microphone.
expert.
I forgot to give that instruction, but you're already doing it.
Thank you,
So
Carol.
talk into the microphone,
Okay,
please.
thank you. I like the comments where we ended up, because I think some people responded with some positive and negative to some of the comments included in this report, and I do give you a lot of credit. I mean, it does reflect a lot of information. My one question is just what you were saying, and that is, how do you put this into action? I think it gives us an opportunity as a resident to say, I like this, I don't like this. Maybe if you tweaked it this way, it'd be better. So I live here in a town where I worry that the little Cape Cod behind me is going to get knocked down, and this gigantic monster house is going to come. How is this document going to help you, as a planning board, change, I guess it's the zoning or whatever the terms would be? And can you do that legally to prevent that gigantic monster house from being built where there used to be a small Cape Cod?
Chris, you want to take it?
Hot topic. It is.
Been for decades, really.
You notice in the master plan, it's been talking about overbuilt homes, probably since 2006. I think the key is, like, we have members of the mayor and council here that will direct, like, we need to prioritize this project and to direct a planner, which could be me, or have the planning board do a study or a subcommittee to really take that to the next step. It's not just a matter of just reduce impervious coverage, just reduce height, because we have to understand how that impacts development. Because some development is good for Metuchen, but we have to analyze what the proper setbacks is, proper light, space and air between buildings, and it varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. So it's.
But who says that? I guess what I'm saying is, make me happy as a resident, make others who don't want to see the character of the town change. How do we set those standards so that doesn't happen? Because company can come in and do it. I'm saying as a citizen, I want to change that. I don't want my neighborhood to change. I think that gets into historic preservation. Because a lot of these are older homes. That was a cute little home. And it really added a lot to the community. And I understand there's pros and cons to have your house historically set, because then you can't do things. I get that. But we're letting neighborhoods not look like a neighborhood anymore. They don't look like they all belong together. Somebody came in the middle of the night and dropped this monster. If you really feel that strongly, we need to do something to give this the ability to limit that. Maybe we can't get rid of it, but we should be able to limit it, because then I hear some other things, like people's basements are flooded, because when the big house comes in and the way they build it, all the water goes to everybody else's place. There's other consequences, that for me as a homeowner, how am I gonna prove that? I'm fighting in business, how am I gonna prove that? I think it's incumbent upon us, we talk about what a wonderful community Metuchen is, but as you pointed out, it's changing. And if we wanna hold on to some of this basic, to me, this plan gives us that opportunity. But I'm concerned that it's gonna take us too long to get to the point where we make any changes. And I'm gonna drive up and down the street of Metuchen, it's not gonna look like the town that I came from.
To each of those applications, actually, I shouldn't even say each application. The borough has ordinances and there are parameters. But, first of all, not everybody has to come to the planning board, and somebody who owns property, who wants to build a house, which may not please everyone else, is entitled to do that. It's not, every type of building and everything that everybody might want, the borough can't mandate in an ordinance. So everything doesn't go to the planning board. The planning board has been pretty aggressive in terms of when people do come, when they have to come, and when the planning board has some leverage. That is, somebody is asking for something to deviate from an ordinance, then the planning board has input into the design, and that sort of thing that, might, appealing to the aesthetics. But if someone presents an application that conforms and goes to let's say to the construction official for a construction permit, and it conforms with the zoning ordinance, there is no discretion there to say, we'd like you to see shutters on the house. We'd like to see, and some of this is also mandated by the Uniform Construction Code. In other words, the state, in order to, we talk about affordability, to make things more predictable, the municipality is not permitted to deviate from the Uniform Construction Code. So if something meets the Uniform Construction Code and it doesn't require a planning or zoning board application, goes to the construction official, that sort of thing gets approved of. So everything, the borough is not permitted and wouldn't be permitted through a master plan or some other regulation to do what you would call aesthetic reviews of construction.
When I listen to the planning board meeting, I always hear this comment that it conforms with the character of the community or something. So it sounds like, who creates an ordinance? Does the council create the ordinance? And maybe that's what I've got to talk to. The council has to create an ordinance that is legal, and then you can use it to hold people accountable for when you tear down the building.
So, and I think what Mr. Renaud is saying, and this is the complication, Ms. Savage, and I think that this is one of the things that we struggle with as a council, and it's just important to have this conversation, this dialogue, because no matter what the ordinance says, if the builder of a property, or if the property owner, is a better way to say it, because we think of these big bad corporate builders, and we have them in town, right? That happens sometimes. But if you think of it as a property owner who's trying to figure out what they can and can't do on a property, if the ordinance that we set, whether it's even stricter than we have or less strict, whatever the circumstances are, they can build to the limit of what the ordinance allows. And there's no appearing before the planning board or the zoning board, depending on the circumstance, when that's the case. So no matter what we do to set the ordinance, someone might be able to come and push the limit. And then we're in a position where, again, we've done this. We've done a fair amount of this. We had some, earlier on in my term or terms ago, we had significant issues with respect to flooding. The flooding was, the water table was such an issue that when it was winter in particular, we would have sheets of ice. And we have this in some communities as a result of, and we fixed it because we saw a problem. When you see a problem, you try to fix it. But unfortunately, there's no silver bullet we're all concerned about that. I mean, that happens in all the neighborhoods. But that's because a person who has a property is going to, if they're selling it for money, they're going to try to maximize what they're able to do to make it as attractive as possible to either themselves or to a buyer. So there's no magic bullet. It's really an ordinance. Setbacks, for example, we can do that. We can determine, how deep a basement needs to be, or how, high, whatever the circumstances are.
Which we've done in order to avoid having problems. The finished floor, lowest finished floor elevation's been raised, the water table was taken into consideration in these applications, done a lot of that sort of stuff. But also, sometimes the board has made choices to avoid some of the monstrosity ideas that you're talking about also, where somebody will come in with an application for a subdivision, and the choice is, okay, does the board want to get two houses that the board has some control over? What will they look like? Where's the driveways going to be? Where are the garages going to be? What's it going to look like? What colors even might it be? What are the windows going to look like? Or turn down that application and know that on that lot, the builder can put anything they want, some monstrosity that nobody would like at all. So, and then, of course, the board sometimes actually hasn't got a lot of criticism, but could be criticized for granting subdivisions, and that's always the motivation of the board, is to try to keep some control over what these things look like when the applications come to the board. We have someone else.
All right.
Michelle Legoff, 20 McCoy Avenue, Metuchen. I've been a resident since 1993. That's a really long time. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for hearing me. I'm here for historic preservation. I'm an activist for the town of Metuchen. We don't want more density in Metuchen. We do not want McMansions. Meet me after the meeting. We do not want our neighborhoods destroyed because Metuchen won't put a leash on Fox and Fox developers who are going through this town, knocking down historic properties and putting up McMansions. Somebody has to put a leash on Fox and Fox. If we want development to happen, we should have also this historic preservation. We don't need to create anything from scratch. This has been on the table since 2023. Okay, this document should be revisited. I've spoken to the Borough Council about this before. This was a thumbs down. This does not have to be reinvented. This are the historic properties in your town of Metuchen. Look at the list of historic properties. Some of them may not exist anymore, okay, because of the problem that you raise. If a property owner can go in, sell to Fox and Fox, they'll level it and they'll encroach on your property. Regardless of what anybody here tonight says, see me after the meeting, okay? The next thing is the Arts District. This is the proposed Arts District right here. This is an old school map, not a digital map. You see the yellow and the green? That's what that looks like. It's a tax map, okay? What's proposed there is to currently knock down some of these properties. I want you to drive by or walk by. This is the town of Metuchen.
Ms. Legoff, can you please speak into the microphone?
Sorry, this is the town of Metuchen's structures from the state of New Jersey, from Trenton. Why was this not recently surveyed? That's a question for you, Mr. Cosenza, because you were initiated to do that, but it didn't happen. So we don't know what exists on this list anymore. Why? Why is that? Okay? But if we go on Google and we can Google, show me the structures in Metuchen that have been demolished, Google can tell me that. And I'm more than happy to share that list with this committee. Okay? This is an encroachment on the character of the town of Metuchen, the Arts District, okay? These are going to be knockdowns, okay? And again, there's no protection for these properties, okay? But these are significant structures. This is from the state, from Trenton, the state of New Jersey. So I would like to know, where's the accountability to protect these structures and not let Fox and Fox just come in, knock them down with the green light from the borough of Metuchen? So for historic preservation right now, this is a historic property. Please drive by 280 Amboy Avenue. We all know it's ridden with asbestos, right? It's lead paint. Lead paint from the 1800s was made with lead and asbestos. This is sitting out there. Why is that allowed to occur? This was not permitted. This was removed, the vinyl siding, without permits. How does that happen in Metuchen? Okay? And there's a caterpillar out there now ready to knock it down. So again, shameful. I understand that your plan is aspirational. We don't want more density in Metuchen. We want to keep our older homes. Again, let's connect after the meeting, or anybody else who would like to ally on this topic. It's an important issue. Another final example in the interest of time, what happened to 31 Woodbridge Avenue? Leveled 3 years ago. Nothing has been done there. There's no permitting. The grass is this high. The Fox are raising their pups there, okay? And the gates are broken. How does that happen in Metuchen on a historic home 150 years old? Leveled. I would like accountability on 31 Woodbridge Avenue. That's our neighborhood. And we have to look at that every day, and that's a historic home. It's gone. Where's the owner of that property? And why does Metuchen allow that to happen in our beautiful town? And last, I want to mention, when I moved into Metuchen, the New York Times wrote an article. I'd be happy to share it with you. The headline says, if you're thinking of living in Metuchen, New Jersey, April 21st, 1996, we are battling to retain its small town identity. Look at that headline. We're battling to retain our small town identity. Mayor's opposition to commercial growth was key to his election. Okay, 1996, the year that I moved in. I want to see historic preservation in Metuchen. We do not need to start from scratch. The more density that we have, the worse climate change that we have. Have we done any emissions accounting? That's another question that I would like to have that conversation with the green team, the prospective green team, because the more cars we have, the more development we have, the more density we have, that weather outside is going to be our new normal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public who haven't had an opportunity to speak yet would like to share their thoughts? Okay, someone's coming down. Yes, Maskia, talk right into that microphone.
Hello.
Hello?
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 Okay. I'm Marisol de los Santos, 285 Middlesex Avenue. Great job on this. I had a couple of questions regarding schools. So that was one of the reports that I was expecting to see. There was a line that said something about there's a overhoused population in Metuchen, right? It suggested that there were a lot of homes, or a percentage of homes that had 2 people living in them, but they really could fit more like 5, right? Okay, so would then the goal be to have those people move into smaller homes in Metuchen and then backfill those with more people?
Overhoused. dwelling units. I'm just trying to remember because, yeah.
Right, like with the population graphics, when it talks about where people live, how many people live in them.
Yep.
So I think the total percentage, and I, again, like, I don't know the facts, but it's there to, it stood out, because it's like less than 10%, right? But what got me thinking is, if that's less than 10%, and all these proposed, right, like, when we factored in the proposed infilling sections, did we calculate that the overall goal is to, was that considered part of that
Yes.
identification of an infill lot? Like, it's appropriate for infill because.
Oh, okay.
Right, like what I'm saying, so like, you're saying, I'm gonna take some of these homes that probably have less people, put more people in them, but then when you decided which pockets would be appropriate for infill, did you calculate that you had already flipped those homes from 2 people to 3 people?
Oh, so sort of the different analyses. So the gentle density mixed middle housing is really more about housing choice that may not exist in Metuchen other than what's allowed in the R4 district, and almost all those areas are already built. So it's more of a matter of housing choice, and it may chip away at the regional affordability issue, but Metuchen can't do it alone. Regarding the overhouse housing, I mean, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I need to look back on those notes, and there's so many notes. I believe that it's the relationship of number of bedrooms in a existing home, not suggesting needs to be demolished. It's just that there's a need. It's not a trend either. There's a situation where there's a grouping of homes where there's an excess number of bedrooms, and that might speak to a few things. One, can those who are 55 plus, 65 plus, are there opportunities for them to downsize to smaller housing? And right now, there isn't much. There's no independent living housing. There's no assisted living. There's very little age-restricted housing other than Whitfield Village. So they may be holding on to those houses, and there may be some households who have what we call them golden handcuffs. They're stuck in the home because they have good rates. It's a multifaceted issue. It's just recognizing that there's housing out there with excess number of bedrooms that families could move into. Not saying they have to demolish it and put a bigger house. That actually might exacerbate the issue to the points that you were describing before. But there is an issue of how can these small households, whether it's young professionals or older adults, are there opportunities to move into smaller housing? I remember at the community meeting, they were saying, I wish there was more condos. I wish there was more townhouses. And those were the things they were thinking about. We need more opportunities for those types of housing. So that the homes that exist could hopefully be sold to a family as opposed to being demolished. But there's a multifaceted issue.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to please take the other microphone. I have to express that we are live streamed, and if you're not using the microphone, they cannot hear you on the screen.
I'm so sorry,
That's
I
okay.
remember that.
Thank you very much.
So that's my point. When you identified those so the pink boxes on your diagrams are a site that could potentially be a good spot for infilling, right?
Generally speaking, it's an opportunity for something different.
So then you've identified those housing that could potentially actually fit more people in them.
There's a percentage of households that exist. I didn't locate where they are.
Okay,
No.
so that was my question. Does that percentage, are those homes identified, and how do they relate to the areas where you've infilled? My concern being, if you flip a house and it had 2 people and now it has 5, and then you go ahead and infill with townhouses, then are you sure that that's really the best place to infill? Because you've now increased the population in those homes too.
So again, it's a multifaceted approach. The solution is not just because there's housing that exists in the community that has more bedrooms than the people who use those bedrooms, they have different issues about why that situation. They may be happy with additional bedrooms. The infill housing sites that are suggested or is contemplating is not meant to resolve that problem. That's more of a housing choice, attainability approach.
So then, however I say this, just make it noted that when you're looking and evaluating infill properties, that you take a look at what's near it to account for that, right? Because you already know which houses have 3 bedrooms.
Not necessarily. I just know there's a percentage of households that
Which
exist.
households have legal 3 bedrooms?
I see what you mean. But we don't have an ability to locate how many residents live in each household in the sense of the way the census is run more at a block level.
We have a blind spot in the data because it's every 10 years.
Exactly.
I get that. Okay, but I just wanted to say, like, when you look at that, you have to account for that if it hadn't been accounted for. The second question I have is more on the infrastructure. In previous plans, this is not my first master plan. I actually worked on a master plan for a small subdivision in Atlanta, Georgia. One of the key parts of the report is an aging infrastructure, right? So I didn't see that in your reporting, and I'm assuming that it's here, we have it, it just wasn't articulated in the report.
Typically, when there's a development, it's have a will serve letter, so for whether it's from cable, electric, gas. Generally, in most cases, almost all approved. That's why we haven't really had any issues of larger developments come in. From what we could tell, and this requires coordination from Public Works as well as with MECUA, MCIA, and the county, to determine really what are the capacity issues.
Okay.
So there's more work that needs to be done to understand what that is, and that's why there's a suggestion of coordinating with those agencies to better understand what that is. So it may inform what types of development would be appropriate.
Okay, and you did say that when you looked at the overall infrastructure as far as utilities are concerned, in 1967, was it? Our population was like 60,000, right? Something like that. So
A little
like,
bit in 1960, so it's below that. 1970, it was 16 plus thousand.
right. So overall, where we are in our grid, right? We have less industrial use going on, right? Like there's less industrial spaces in Metuchen in general.
Yes, manufacturing district from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, 50s have gotten a little bit smaller, and they're now located at the edges of rail corridors.
So when we're looking at all of our infrastructure, we have capacity. So we definitely have the capacity to have more people in this town, right? Like,
Yeah, by virtue of the existing zoning.
by the existing,
Yeah.
no, by the infrastructure of the utilities, right? So we have appropriate water management for the people that we have, and then some, right? Because our population in 67 was 60,000, and now we're down to 15,000.
Yeah.
Right? So we've decreased our population, so our capacity is still there. We don't have any issues with,
So we didn't get into that much detail into the analysis. That's why it requires coordination with those facilities. To date, even with the Woodmont project and other apartment buildings, we have not received any feedback from agencies that we're running into an issue. Unlike, say, South Brunswick, where I was working on a project to build a townhouse community, and they had to wait for a well to come online.
okay,
So that issue is less of an issue in Metuchen.
perfect. And then
And just to add, we did just replace the pump station.
I just want to make sure there's no other big expenditures that we can anticipate in the next 10 years.
No, and a lot of sorry if I.
No, but that's the question, because I feel like
Yeah,
there's a lot going on, but that's the one part that I
There's-
think is the most important for the master plan that we.
Absolutely. And infrastructure's been a priority. We're catching up on lots of years of not having, decades of just catching up with respect to infrastructure. And so much of it is actually done by outside entities, state, county, water company, sewer, the water company, gas company. So, and unfortunately, you see the bridge on Grove Street, Grove Avenue, I should say. You see the work that's being done on Main Street. Just wait. I mean, we sit here and say we want to fix the infrastructure, and we all do. But just wait. I mean, the stuff that we're seeing coming down the pipeline as an administration right now is darn right inconvenient. I mean, we all know about the Main Street project. That's going to be $9.3 million worth of work that's going to be done on Main Street to make it more pedestrian friendly, to make it easier for us to get around on bikes, on our feet, to make it safer. That's going to take a year or so to implement that. We've got.
And that's after the water main project.
There's a water main project that's going to be coming through town that we've got to replace because the water main is aging. And we all know about water mains from some of the national stories, the importance of maintaining your water and maintaining, so this is happening, but a lot of it, thank God, is not our expense. It's the expense of others, but it is all of our inconvenience. But you got to balance it with the fact that it needs to be done and addressed. But it's all in the pipeline, and it continues to be a priority for us.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question was about the tree canopy. Hold on. No, actually, if I understand the report correctly, height requirements, the largest, tallest building that we have, the requirement is basically 6 stories, and that's in the zone that's closest to the train station, Main Street, right? That's the only place that could have
it's
it.
within a certain parcel of the Metuchen Arts District,
Okay.
the one closest to the rail line.
So in the current ordinances, what would be is there any reason why we would ever exceed that 3-story threshold? Like, is there any caveat, like, it can exceed 6 stories if blah, 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 blah? Do we have any of those caveats?
I'm not sure above 6 stories would ever happen. Hope not. But generally speaking, this master plan doesn't really speak to a lot about height other than perhaps tweaking the 35 to 40 feet to allow for a taller first floor, which is better for a mixed-use building, and still have 2 stories of residential, for example, downtown. I didn't go into a lot of detail about it, but in the downtown area, in particular Main Street, and I think on Middlesex Avenue, I think the consensus was, what we heard from the public as well as consultants and myself and mayor and council was, we ever don't want to really go over 3 stories on Main Street. If there is a 4th story, got to step it back, just like with 410 Main Street, or locate it on Pearl or New Street, where you do see the taller 5 or 4-story buildings.
Okay,
So
just for-
it depends on the scale and what the character of each street. It does vary from street to street.
But the parking deck on Pearl Street, how many stories is that? That's 6 stories. Is that because that's the tallest building?
I think it's 6 levels. Yeah.
6 levels. Okay, so we can't get anything bigger than that in our current ordinance rules.
Under the current ordinance, I mean, other than the arts district with the 1 parcel with 6 stories, I don't think anything's allowed over 3 stories. I
In
think
most of Metuchen.
for residential areas, it's definitely 3 stories. For the commercial districts, most of it's 3. In the downtown, at certain pockets where I believe 4s. I have to go back into my research, but I can get back to you later.
And then to address the McMansion issue, there's still an ordinance that talks about proportionality of how much permissible land there is, right? So like, you can't take your whole lot and make it a building.
Right. So the issue there, from my opinion, is that there's a blanket 30% building coverage, which includes porches, and sheds, and garages in addition to the house. And there's also a maximum 50% impervious coverage. What does impervious mean? Oh, that gravel doesn't count. So those are one of the things we need to clarify. But it's 30% building coverage, 50% building coverage in almost all districts, no matter how big your lot is. That is one of the issues that need to be addressed. Something I did in Holland Park was I recommended as part of similar recommendation in the master plan and the ordinances. What we did was we tied the proportion of the lot to what was permissible. So if you have a really large lot, you don't need 50%. You don't need a 30% house. You could probably get away with 15 or 10, 20. But it depends on a parcel because it does reduce a lot of what we permit, and we don't want to take all the rights away from the largest lots. But for the smallest lots, if you live in a radio section or in Charles Street, if it's a 35-foot wide lot, 30% is not much. And that's places where maybe that needs to ratchet up to 35%. It needs to be looked at on a almost, not just a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, but also on a lot size by lot basis. And the numbers should change accordingly. So we don't have the biggest house on the street that just happens to have a really large lot. And when it's small lots, those homeowners are penalized because they bought a small lot decades ago. So there needs to be sort of a right sizing of those regulations, which includes height, impervious coverage, and building coverage, and setbacks and whatnot.
And just for people who don't know, that has a lot to do with water, right? So when we're worried about flash flooding,
Yes.
we want to make sure that the ground absorbs as much water as possible and it doesn't go on the street.
Right. So many streets don't have stormwater sewer, so when the water is discharged from the sump pumps, they go out into the street and they sit there. The idea is that through the new ordinances that we have, new ordinance meeting from 2019, the drainage regulations, that those, for new houses at least, they have to go into a dry well or seepage pit.
Right.
And then the outfall goes into the street. That might need to be looked at further so that maybe if we were to reduce impervious coverage for a homeowner, that would reduce their ability to put a patio or a deck on, which is modest in a backyard. But there may be trade-offs if you say you can do that as long as you put a dry well system nearby. But there's strategies to do that without over-encumbering homeowners.
Okay. And then, forgive me if I didn't see it because it was a really long report. The tree canopy in all of the environmental studies, is there a percentage of tree plantings that's recommended, right? You show the map of how we're dwindling, so do we have a goal of how many trees we should be planting to have an impact?
No, and that's something we need to work with the Shade Commission. I mean, it's great when you get 300 trees in a year, but reality is it needs to be that many every year, for example. I believe the percentage, I wonder if you know, Pete, the percentage tree canopy was low, It's reduced by about 4% to under 40%. Yeah, so it's under 40%. I think the target's about, I think it's 50% or more, or 40. Yeah, I believe the information's in the Community Forestry Management Plan.
Okay.
So I might have rephrased that wrong.
All right. Okay. That's it. Nope, I'm done. Thank you.
Don Bouch, 66 Whitman Avenue. I beat Michelle, by the way, on being a long-time resident of Metuchen. My family moved here in 1959. I bought the house from my parents, and then my daughter now bought the house, and I moved onto Whitman Avenue. And one of the reasons why I moved, okay, and I'm following up on the prior conversation, was because I wanted a smaller house. Well, in Metuchen, it's very difficult to find a small house. And being my age, okay, needed to be a ranch. How many ranches are now in Metuchen? They're virtually non-existent. Okay, so I had either a choice of moving into Whitman Avenue, which is known as the Speedway of Metuchen, okay, and now, okay, either that or else go into a condo. Okay, I'm 76 years old, but I still want to have a house. I still cut the lawn. I still do work on it. Okay, that's part of me. That's part of this town. Okay, but that's gone now. Okay, what we're doing is building apartments and high-rise developments. Okay, in other words, even the Arts District plan. On Main Street, it says no higher than 5 stories, and the rest of the area can be 6 stories high. That's as high as the Woodmont, the one section that's closest to the plaza. And the setback says on Amboy Avenue, as much as it is currently there. Well, if you look at University Radiology in the street and the building that's right across from it, you know, from 280 Amboy Avenue, they're only 10, 15 feet from the street. So we could have buildings all along that Amboy Avenue. That's horrible. And we're tearing down 280 Amboy Avenue that Michelle just mentioned. A house that was a historic house that was built in 1770. That is sinful. That is truly sinful for anyone. Hopefully they don't pay triple time and knock it down on July 4th. I'm very emotional about this because, let me tell you, okay, there's 4 other houses on Amboy Avenue that are going to be torn down. Okay, all for the arts development, redevelopment plan.
And just in the spirit of wanting to let everybody have an opportunity to speak, and you are certainly part of that group, right? We're just going to ask everybody if you can, let's try to keep it as clear and concise as you can on what your points are. So I know that we're all very passionate, and that's part of why we live in Metuchen, because we care so much. So nothing wrong with that, right?
Okay.
But we just want everybody who's here tonight to have an opportunity to speak. So if you can try to be as succinct as you can,
Okay.
it would be great for all your fellow citizens, and that's not a criticism.
Very good, thank you. Okay, on the historic preservation plan element, there's a section in here that says applicants that come before the planning board will need to submit to the Historic Preservation Committee areas that are noted on historic maps and everything of Metuchen, okay, by the town of Metuchen, before they proceed. And one of them was the Edgar School parking lot. Okay, that sounded very strange to me. I mean, since I've been living here, okay, I've never seen any houses here. I was here when they built the pool, okay? So I don't remember anything being historic. The only historic thing there is the blacktop and the stones driveway for the pool. So why is something that is not historic being brought to the attention of the Historic Preservation Committee?
If I could answer that.
And yet, 280 Amboy Avenue, which is on the state of New Jersey historic list.
I think we have someone who might have an answer for you who wants to at least try to answer you.
Well, the reason why the parking lot came to the attention of the Historic Preservation Committee is because the paving of that lot is a federal grant. And as part of a federal grant, you have to do an environmental review.
Okay.
And part of the environmental review is a historic review.
Okay.
Called the Section 106 or something like that. And so we had to have the Historic Preservation Committee attest that it was not a historic site. So that's why we did it
Well,
for
it doesn't
there.
define that in this element that.
Yeah, but
that you
I'm just,
For clarification, thank you. On the next page of the plan, there's the section where it says the New Jersey Historic Preservation Office of New Jersey granted in 1989 monies to the town to create a historic preservation ordinance. 1989. It's right here. It's on number 4. Then again, in 2021, there was more grant money issued to the Metuchen to develop a historic preservation ordinance, and nothing was done. That same very year that the town accepted the award, I don't know whether they actually used it or not, the planning board, okay, it says right here, and I read this, following the adoption of the 2001 plan element, the borough did not proceed to adopt a historic preservation ordinance. Okay. That's in 2021. I've read 5 years' worth of Historic Preservation Committee meeting minutes. Okay. So for 4 years, the town said they're not going to continue it, but yet let the committee go ahead, continue with its creation of that plan, spend all that money, all that effort to do what? Because the town already said in 2021 that they weren't even going to proceed with an ordinance. So what a waste of time for the committee. Of course, that committee has now been rechanged.
Okay, sir, again, in the spirit of letting everybody speak, I think we understand how you feel about that issue. We understand what you're trying to tell us, and if you could continue on with your other
I
topics.
just wanted to point out some, because you did air some good information here in the element, okay?
Okay, well, it's been a couple ask, and maybe give me another 5, and then let someone have a chance also.
All right, just one last question then.
Sure, then.
Okay, as regarding the data that you recovered, the Historic Preservation Survey said that there was 417 survey participants. Is that statistically significant number considering the population of Metuchen?
Based on my experience, that's a reasonable figure. You'll never get many more than that.
417 people, okay. And then, you know, even for the other one, the community vision statement, it's very misleading how the data is presented. Okay, it's like a sales report here, where it shows that 44,731 were total responses. Well, that just means that that's how many questions there were, I guess, in the survey that people responded to.
Correct.
Now, unfortunately, in today's day and age, and I heard a lot about communications, today's day and age, there is no more recorder. There is no more criterion. There's got to be a better way to communicate things to the residents of this town, okay, for surveys to be presented. How about a letter with a self-addressed envelope sent to every address in Metuchen? Spend a little extra money and get real input, meaningful input from the residents, not 417 people.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who haven't had an opportunity to speak yet, if you'd like to come.
I also want to address, if I can,
Please.
From the borough side on the historic, I think there's a couple misconceptions of the historic issue. The historic issue is incredibly important to the council. Like, full stop. Full stop. Just to correct, Mr. Bausch, what you said, there is no specific plan for the Arts District other than a redevelopment concept. Okay, there are people who are property owners in that space who are looking to come forward at some point with a project, but nothing is specific other than the Forum Theater from the borough side and the adjacent property at the gas station, which we've talked about publicly many, many times. Okay, but individual property owners, like we talked about in the context of Ms. Savage's question, for example, the inquiry with respect to ordinances, if you have a property that is yours and you meet the standard under the ordinance, you can do what you want with your property without having to go before additional bodies. The issue for the council, and we punted it at the time it's not that we rejected it, and Ms. Legoff, we talked about this in public at a council meeting once. I'm just telling you just in response to what you said. I understand. Yeah, I just want to be very clear. We were interested in hearing what people had to say because we got so much pushback from so many different perspectives on the very issue that you're describing. Because in New Jersey, unfortunately, the statute on historic preservation is incredibly rigid. It requires you to either not have one at all, which is not what we want, not what the council wants. I could speak for them as mayor. I know I've spoken to the council members. Or you can have a very strict, there's two options you could have, both of which establish a historic preservation commission, which is a similar body to the planning board or the zoning board. It would be an additional body that would require an additional administration, okay, additional night of the week that would be here, or night of the month, or whatever, where people with historic properties, or those considered on that list that Ms. Legoff was showing, for example, to the community, would have to come before that body and prove that the structure should come down. And to be honest, you know, that list, for example, are properties that are under a particular age, or I should say over a particular age. They're under a particular year, but over a particular age. And a lot of those properties are important for us, right? We drive past them every day. You've been here since, what did you say, 1959? You lived in this town,
Yes.
right? I haven't lived in this town as long as you, and I certainly commend your family and your dedication for living here. They're probably even more significant to you because it's almost like a muscle memory thing. You drive past them every day. They're beautiful. But I have to remind myself sometime as mayor that unless we have a ordinance that severely restricts what people can do with their property, some of them are as beautiful as the one you described on Amboy Avenue, which is very important to me as well as a resident of this town. Some of these structures are just falling apart, some of them. And maybe even that one on Amboy Avenue, not inspected. But in the meantime, private property owners can do what they want. Those properties are not coming down for the Arts District. That property owner is taking those homes, or proposing to take those homes down, because they're choosing to do so on their own. And that's something that we have to deal with as a borough and as residents. We don't have a choice necessarily on those. We have a choice on whether or not to do an ordinance. And I think the master plan is going to give us some further guidance now on what we can do. But we're still straddled by our state legislature, where if we adopt this ordinance, we have to create an additional body, and anyone who wants to do basically anything to their home, even if it's creating a new kitchen or a additional bedroom or whatever they plan to do with their home, they would have to comply with the historic preservation ordinance. And there's a lot of residents in this community who don't want to be told by their government what they can and can't do with their property. And that's just the reality of it. So it's a complicated issue. It's far more complicated than just, we want this home because it's important to us as we drive past it. Because believe me, when you talk about that home on Amboy, I'll bet you I'm right there, up there with you in terms of my concern over its demolition. And by the way, our understanding, it is coming down, and I'm very upset about it too.
Okay, thank you. One of the things I want to point out, though, is that that house is in need of tear down at this point because of what's called demolition by neglect. Okay, in October of last year, that house, okay, had its siding removed, its exterior siding removed, revealing what appears to be the 1770 vintage siding. It contains lead. Okay? It's been that way to the current time. Okay, and now we're going to tear it down. I've even asked Joanne, what does the permit have on it? I sent you an email saying, is at least the contractor that's going to tear down the house have EPA certification for lead containment? I haven't heard back, but I'm hoping it will before they tear it down. Okay, I understand. Okay, but I'm just saying. And then not only was the house, all the siding removed, so it's an eyesore to the town now, but then windows were even left open. Okay, that is a true, if you look it up on Google, okay, it is a true example of demolition by neglect. What a shame a 1770 house has done that. I'm sorry. Now, so what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, is that because this homeowner who owns 75% of the land based on the report, okay, the Arts District report, owns 75% of the property on the development plan, the houses, the demolition, the town was not going to gain from this, or the Arts District was not going to gain from it?
No,
Okay,
but-
because
yeah.
if that seller didn't want to sell it,
The town wouldn't
the
gain.
Arts Development, can I finish? The Arts Development Commission, or the plan would fall apart, because how are you possibly going to build a plan with 75% of the property not even being owned by the contractor or the town, one or the other?
It's just a land use plan, sir. It's not, it's a land use plan for, concept that had lots of, just community discussion. And really, the centerpiece of any such, listen, you can only build the stuff that you're responsible for. The borough only owned the theater as a result of its purchase in 2019. That's what we're doing. We're building a theater. When you build a theater, there's property owners around it that might say, okay, since there's going to be a theater here, I either want to have a home here, or I want to have a business here. That's the natural process of development. That's how things get developed in this particular area. But the borough wouldn't benefit from a private property owner deciding to do something that's either compliant or part of the plan with an ordinance or zoning or part of a plan. That's just, we have to, at some point, this community has to take responsibility for what's going to be somewhere, or it's the developers who are deciding what's going to happen. We have to decide what we want, knowing that development is allowed, it's permitted, and we have to work within the constraints of the law, including with respect to this historic preservation ordinance possibility, which we could never, and have it withstood in court, adopt our own preservation ordinance that decides what we want if it's a modified version of what the state allows. So this is far more complicated than just say we don't like when people do this. When private property owners have an ability to determine on their own properties what they're going to do, they're going to do that. And that's the concern we have. And yes, we take whatever steps we can. I know our zoning and our construction office has been concerned with respect to some of the issues that you've raised. We've done our part. From what I understand, I've been asking the question ever since you raised it with us as a council and mayor. But our hands are to some degree tied, but we're doing whatever we can otherwise. So that's all. That was only my point. I know there's another person.
No, I understand that, and that's what a historic preservation ordinance would take care of. And since 1989, in two grants that have been issued.
We're working towards
we're
something.
still on.
Guys, I'm gonna shut you down here, guys. We know how you feel. Mayor, I know how you feel. Sir, I know how you feel. I think the board understands your concerns. I really want to let other people have an opportunity to speak. So thank you for sharing your comments, and let's let another person have a chance to speak.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Orlando. I live at 18 Newman Street, and I'm also a member of the Metuchen Human Relations Commission. I'm going to read something that I prepared, very succinct, apropos of something on page 79 of the report. It's the land use recommendations, item 4, heading Public Realm Walkability and Inclusive Community Design. The 5th bulleted item, create an inclusive design and community access checklist. So the current language says, consider preparing a checklist for public facilities, public spaces, recreation areas, and applicable private development to address inclusive signage, family or private changing areas, lighting and visibility, accessible gathering spaces, community meeting or programming space, and zoning flexibility for community serving uses such as nonprofit space, counseling, support services, and similar uses. So my feedback is when discussing inclusivity, it is important to clearly identify minority and vulnerable groups within our community that require more visibility and accessibility. When referencing accessibility in public buildings and spaces, it would be important to clearly identify checklist items for all genders, family types, and ability levels. In order to effectively advocate for these vulnerable groups within our community, the language in this plan must be more specific. For a facilities checklist, single occupancy bathrooms should be designated in accordance with ADA guidelines to accommodate people of all ability levels. These bathrooms should have clear signage indicating the accessibility level and signaling access for all genders, as well as individuals or families needing assistance in the restroom. Also, just an the cuff comment, I think I heard that there's a recommendation to think about the zoning laws that currently allow warehouses, the older style warehouse, but I agree that that our town boards should be proactive in prohibiting the modern warehouse and be proactive about that. Think about that, even if it means a missed opportunity to increase the tax base. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, next person in line, come on down. Share your thoughts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Grossman, and I live at 125 Hillside Avenue. Before I hop into anything, I just wanted to thank all of you for the dedication of the master plan to my father-in-law, Alan. It's very kind of you, and it goes a very long way, and my family is very appreciative. The report that you guys put together is extremely robust and thoughtful, considers a lot of factors that I think people in town take for granted. So thank you for putting it together, and it's definitely very robust and thoughtful. I have a few questions, comments, things that I hope could be potentially changed. But again, just wanted to present them and see what folks think. So people mentioned already that this is an aspirational document, but one thing that we know is not aspirational and is actually a factual thing that we determined a couple weeks ago was about the Hillside Lane bike project. The mayor posted that the bike lane was deemed inappropriate at the time. During the 420 meeting, it was deemed that there would be alternative uses or alternative measures to address the bike lane itself, but the master plan continues to push a hillside bike lane without any caveats. So I would just ask that included in the master plan, that we at least say that there wouldn't be a bike lane on Hillside Avenue that impacts parking for residents, which was the most important takeaway from that meeting. No one here is asking that there is no bike lane on Hillside Avenue. No one is trying to stop bicycle infrastructure. But we all came to, whether we agree with it or not, some mutual agreement that there would be no bike lane on Hillside Avenue that impacts resident parking. And I would hope that in such a consequential document like this, which is passed once every 10 years, that we include the information that we all just came to some relevant agreement on just a couple of weeks ago. The next thing I wanted to ask, I guess, I don't know if it's to you or the council about, is a comment on page 318, also about bike infrastructure, but just trying to get a little bit of more clarity on what the comment means. So it says, because community input on the bicycle network expansion was more mixed than sidewalks and crossings, this topic warrants a holistic approach that treats bicycle infrastructure as part of a larger system. I wanted to understand what that actually means. Because to me, we are a driving town. Most residents have 2 cars. It's much more than the state and county average. No one, it literally says in the report that 0 people ride their bikes to the train station. So trying to understand what this means, because to me it sounds like we're trying to now group bikes in with other types of town-related issues in order to get things passed through, when it doesn't seem like that's actually a core tenet of what residents in town care about. I don't know if I should stop now and let you respond, or if I should continue with all
I
the
think you
questions.
let her ask your question, let him respond,
Sure,
and then you
absolutely.
can go on to your next one. There you go. Chris, jump right in.
Yeah, so this is mainly to acknowledge that the bicycle infrastructure feedback from the survey was maybe not as robust as sidewalks and crosswalks, but understand from a planning perspective and from other professionals and just general street design and from committees and boards, bicycle infrastructure still is important to Metuchen. I mean, it's part of the 2016 plan. What this master plan is saying is, instead of doing just a Hillside Avenue or whatever route it might be, is take another step back and think about updating the 2016 bike ped plan with another focus, which would include bicycle infrastructure. All those modes of travel should be considered.
Okay, it doesn't say that. So maybe clarification of that would be a worthwhile change. Then my next question, or I guess at this point it's more of a commentary about the historical committee. So I live in a historical home. I waited 3 years to buy a historical home. I absolutely love living in a historical home. It's a huge pain in the ass to own a historical home. And I love every bit of it. And I think the majority of people in town who own historical homes did it for a reason. Everyone went into this knowing what was going to happen by owning a historical home. And it would be a shame to implement some sort of additional layer of scrutiny or approvals in order to make changes to your home. The majority of people who own these homes are doing it as a labor of love. We want to improve these homes. We want to make them better. And I think that some of the points that were made earlier where, developers are taking over, people are, tearing down these homes, I would venture to say the onus is on the current owner who was selling to those developers. There's everyone who's a landowner and a homeowner who owns a historical home has the right and ability to choose who they sell their homes to. And people are choosing to sell to developers. To all of your points about the ordinances in town, whoever owns a house can do whatever they want on that land, so long as it fits the rules, including who you sell that house to. So I would hope that the town doesn't take the stance of inhibiting homeowners who own historical homes, who are trying their best to renovate them, save them, keep them as updated as they possibly can, because there's a few bad eggs in town who are selling to Fox and Fox and putting up, McMansions. So that was I originally had a question, but through the conversation, that just became more evident to me what was going on. And then the last question I have, which isn't really included in the report, but is more of a relevant topic today and in neighboring towns as well, is how Metuchen is thinking about data center development and other big infrastructure project development. I don't know if it's not relevant because we're so small and there's no actual place to put them, so it's not really a concern. But a lot of neighboring towns in Middlesex County and Monmouth County have made, I don't know if vows is the right word, but have agreed to at least put a pause on data center development or even considering it. So I just thought that this would be an appropriate place to bring it up because it's a planning meeting.
That is a good comment. When I was drafting the recommendations after input with the subcommittee and obviously weighing all the comments in the public, that did not rise to the level of being input in the plan because data centers are not allowed currently. So I did not think that would be a problem. It's not specifically permitted, therefore it's prohibited in Metuchen. So there's really no need to change it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't not change your ordinance to clarify distribution centers or other high heavy uses. And just while you're updating the ordinance, just throw in data center just for good measure.
Yeah.
I'm less concerned with that because it's not permitted today.
No, that's super helpful. I didn't know that. So I guess to finalize my thoughts, would be grateful to get some feedback on including more clarity around Hillside Bike Lane project in the future, given it's a 10-year plan, and given the fact that we've all come to some reasonable agreement that parking for residents of Hillside and people who are impacted by the bike lane parking wouldn't be impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other members of the public who haven't had an opportunity to speak, come on down. Those of you are, share your thoughts.
David Liss, 202 Delwood Road. Since Mayor Bush, since you're here, I'd just like to take a minute to say a word about how wonderful our public works people are. I mean, this morning I didn't know that we had to have the garbage pails out, and I hear the garbage trucks, and the guy's going past my house, and I'm running down with the garbage pail, and he sees this old guy running down, and he stops the truck and backs up. And takes the garbage pail. That's just humanity, That's just really being nice, and it's great to live in a place where people are nice.
We'll be sure to share this clip with them tomorrow.
Oh, good. So I want to say something about the bike lane and then ask a question. Mr. Lifton, I really appreciate you're always returning. You did it when you were on the Board of Ed. You're doing it here. This idea of returning to the needs of the people, and I think that's really critical. My comment about the bike lane is that, and what you heard at the council meeting was that people may not be experts in something as complicated as a master plan, but people are experts in how things affect their lives. And so what you heard was people coming out and saying, this is not theoretical. You guys aren't theoreticians, you are practitioners. These bike lanes will affect us in these really negative ways. So I was dismayed when I saw that the Hillside Avenue, and I'm on Delwood Road, it would affect me as well, to see that that was still there. And people are still affected in the same way. My neighbor still has a mother on hospice care, and the visiting nurse comes every day and parks on the curb. We all have the same set of issues, and so this is not a theoretical exercise. This may be an aspirational document, but it's not a theoretical exercise. You guys are practitioners, you're not theoreticians. And so everything has to have context. Even people, the 400 odd people who responded to the survey, there was a previous survey about the bike lanes, and what was evident was that that survey was missing really critical context. Do you want a bike lane? Sure, I want a bike lane, without ever understanding how that bike lane would affect people's lives. I didn't take the survey that you had, so perhaps, Chris, that survey did include any context. You know, the people of Metuchen want a bike lane because they understand it will remove parking from their homes and they'll have to do without parking. I don't know if you included that, but a survey without that kind of context wouldn't be meaningful. So, so my comment on the bike lane is that the problems are still the problems. And Mr. Mayor, people may not be coming to the meetings, but I tell you that people do watch them on TV. And so there is an audience for meetings like this.
Fair, totally fair. I'm not saying nobody participates, but I do get a chance, by the way, Mr. List, to see how many people participate, at least on Facebook. And sometimes the audience on Facebook Live is like 6, and at least one of them is my dad because he's telling me to fix my tie.
Okay.
So just as an idea, like and that's an exaggeration, but we want more participation, and your neighborhood coming out that meeting is an example of why. It just in general, that was important for us to see that.
I would say that it's really good that for those of us who are watching it on TV, the camera's not 2 ways, because you wouldn't want to see us.
During COVID, we had a chance, I think.
My one question about the master plan development. So I think that the development we've had in town over the last few years has actually gone well. I mean, I think I was suspicious of it. I was concerned about it, but I think it's been good for the town. I think it's been good for the town's economy, generally speaking. But since we are initiating this 10-year plan, my question is, do we have a number in mind in terms of how big this town should be? So you went through some historical data about the population from over a period of about 6 decades. Since we're planning a type of housing, the gentle development that you're describing, Chris, may I call you Chris? You can call me David. Since we're really thinking about what that looks like, is there an upper limit? Do we have a number of people that we're actually thinking of that should live in this town?
The answer is no. At this point, it's more about managing growth because the nation, state, county, the region is growing. The question is, how do we manage that growth? I don't think it's appropriate to put a cap on it. Frankly, the underlying zoning, without any changes, could accommodate probably a couple thousand other extra people. Plus, you have the affordable housing mandate over the course of the next 10 years. Whether or not it comes to fruition, that's a small chunk of it. But generally speaking, there's no upper limit that we're suggesting. The community's already built out. There's no additional land that we're really building on. It's all going to be through infill development. So it's really a balancing act as to the character of the neighborhood and the infrastructure, including traffic.
So what you just articulated an opinion about a policy position. Your opinion was that that you don't think we should put a cap on the population, and that's a completely legitimate policy. I don't know what the policy should be. But another legitimate perspective would be that there should be a cap, and it's not haphazard. We have control through our zoning. What can be built in this town, we do have some level of control over, and that would be an interesting public discussion to have, because to the point that Mr. Lifton made earlier, there would be good feedback from the community on should there be an upper limit of what we build. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other members of the public who haven't had a chance to speak yet, come on down. Here we go.
Hi, My name's Alexa Dietrich, and I live at 29 Bounty Street in Metuchen. I would say, actually, the comment about whether you have expertise in something or lived experience in something, I want to say that the comment that I'm about to make, I have both. I have a doctorate and master's degrees in public health and behavioral sciences, and I'm an expert in cumulative health impacts and social determinants of health. I'm also a board member of Outfront Metuchen, but I should say that I'm here speaking in my personal capacity as a resident of Metuchen. There are a variety of admirable ways in which the master plan and reexamination report draft addresses accessibility equity in municipal benefits and services, from tree cover to transportation. The plan's stated values emphasize improving access to existing facilities and services by enhancing usability, connectivity, and awareness with a focus on accessibility and flexibility, page 285. This also mentions that it has gathered community input during Downtown Pride, for example, an event that celebrates the LGBTQ plus community, and featured a photograph of that event. It is well documented that this community experiences unique stressors due to stigmatization and discrimination, both interpersonal and structural, which can lead to notable mental and physical health disparities, even when socioeconomic status is held constant. In our current political environment, when federal policies increasingly invite and encourage the policing of gender norms, this will only become more severe. Public bathrooms are a key site for this type of interaction, and cis people and families can also find themselves caught in the crossfire of gender policing. Women with short hair, boys with long hair. Anyone who doesn't look right is at risk. Ask yourselves how it would feel if someone challenged your right to use a public bathroom. Imagine what kind of proof someone might try to require to reassure themselves that you are who you say you are. Imagine the stress, the anguish. Imagine the consequences if you suddenly felt unwelcome to use that bathroom that should be available to everyone. All gender designations for single-seat bathrooms are an easy, common, and common-sense policy answer that help protect everyone in the community. They require no significant expense, and they make bathrooms more accessible to every single community member, including families who may need to help one another with toileting. I urge you, as a matter of public health, equity, accessibility, and making everyone feel welcome in our community, to include an active policy solution for all gender bathrooms in this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other members of the public who haven't had an opportunity to speak, please come forward and tell us who you are, what's on your mind.
Amanda Lynn, 3 Sylvan Avenue. I'm also a member of Human Relations Commission. It was more, this will be quick, it was just a clarification question. On page 15, it mentioned that there was a mid-process review of survey respondent demographics and identified a gap in representation. So really pleased to see that there was supplemental outreach that was done. My question was, as a result of that supplemental outreach, did you close the gap and get to the outcomes that you were looking for in terms of representation?
Not completely. I think the young adults category cohort was still not well represented in relation to what the actual demographic is for Metuchen.
Okay. Thank you.
I will say, Chris, I was glad to see the term teen activities listed on one of your topics there, something that never was present before, so just a non sequitur. Okay, other members of the public who haven't had an opportunity to speak yet would like the chance to do so now. Okay, I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay, we have a gentleman, come on forward.
Hi, Andrew Lappett, 41 Michael Drive. 41 Michael Drive. Just disclosure, I am on the committee for this master plan effort, but more importantly, I'm just a resident like everyone else here. I just want to emphasize my support for the middle missing housing section of this report. I think this is crucial right now. I certainly wouldn't look at it as needing more density, but rather as we need a diversity of housing in this borough. It's pretty expensive to move here now, to buy here now. I know this is kind of anecdotal, but I moved here I bought a home here about 6 years ago, and once I moved here, I had friends come and visit. And after one visit to Metuchen, I had several of them say that they wanted to start looking to buy homes here. And, to be fair, this was about beginning of COVID 2020. And so like right away, the prices just shot up overnight. And so sadly, none of those friends ended up buying a home here because they just couldn't afford it anymore. But opportunities like this, like the middle missing housing that we really need, really could benefit from. Again, I wouldn't look at it as having more density. I would look at it as diversifying our housing supply. And I just want to say that I'm in support of it, and I just hope others are too. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Other members of the public who haven't had a chance to speak yet would like to do so now? Again, I'm just making sure. I don't want to miss anybody who has something on their mind. Okay, I think that concludes the public portion. Bob, would you agree?
Yes, I think we're done.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public portion now. All right. So, I want to thank everybody for sharing what was on their mind. I love contrarian opinions, good or bad. John, in particular, I love yours the most because they're always so well thought out. And, it's not good when everybody thinks the same. It's good to have, diversity of opinion. All right, Robert, do we need to do any accounting?
Well, we have a resolution before you to adopt the master plan. Should you choose, the operative portion of the resolution would read, now therefore be it resolved by the Planning Board of the Borough of Metuchen, County of Middlesex, and State of New Jersey, pursuant to NJSA 4055D28, it hereby adopts the master plan of the Borough of Metuchen dated June 2026, prepared by Chris Cosenza, professional planner, a copy of which is attached here too. There are some whereases and some other provisions, but those are the operative parts.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, if we wanted to make a few changes to this, it's a couple tweaks, not the, the global sense, but a couple of comments that from tonight and some sentence modification, just to ensure that we incorporate some of the community input. How would we go about doing that, Mr. Renaud?
Well, we'd have to have what they are, obviously, and we could amend the resolution to say, with the following changes, and then they'd have to be done, so we'd have to enumerate what those changes would be.
Obviously, I know the reason we had to have this meeting tonight was because we want to make sure that we don't let any time lapse with respect to the prior plans.
Mhm.
I know that was a big issue and something we've had a discussion internally and externally in some ways about with some emails that we've received. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this to comply. Would it be possible to adopt this tonight as is, maybe make a couple tweaks with our planning team? Based on some of the feedback tonight, maybe rewatch this, well, maybe not rewatch the whole thing, but parts of it that are important in particular, and then have some sort of amendment done at the next planning board meeting? Would that be possible?
Probably wouldn't be possible at the next planning board meeting because you'd have to have another public hearing if you were going to amend the master plan. So we'd have to have a public hearing with public notice.
Is there a operative clause that we can place in the be it resolved clause that gives the authority to you as our board attorney to be able to make some of these? Again, they're clarifications to some degree on some of these issues where we can have those clarifications made, and we would delegate that authority so long as the planning board was okay with that, knowing that these were not something that would substantially change the document, would just give a little more color and detail in the areas that we're concerned about.
Well, I wouldn't do the changes. We'd have to have a list. If we were going to make changes, we'd have to have a list of what the changes are and then ask the planner to make those changes. In other words, it would be, adopts the master plan of the Borough of Metuchen, blah, 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 with the following changes. Now we'd have to list what the changes are, and then we could do that.
So they wouldn't necessarily have to be specific language changes. They could be general concepts, and then you would draft those, correct? And if the planning board had a problem,
Chris would draft them, yes.
Chris would draft them.
Can I suggest that maybe we have the intent to, we adopt the master plan as it is right now, because again, any amendment would need, again, a public
Right.
hearing, even if it's just to change 3 words. So is there another document or something that's not called the master plan or the amendment to the master plan that would reflect maybe a summary of some of the comments or, public comments that were made, but not necessarily incorporated specifically into the master plan.
I think it would make more sense if you were inclined to do that, to adopt the master plan as it is and then do the public hearing. There's no reason why we can't have another public hearing if you want to amend the master plan.
Yeah, I'm not talking about substantial. This thing's almost, it's largely done. There's just a couple things I thought maybe we could incorporate into this, and maybe that's just the lawyer in me, but I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate some of the more, I don't think it changes anything that's actually been concluded. It's just the way it's written in certain places, frankly.
Yeah, to clarify a couple statements.
Mr. Cosenza, let me just ask you, I think you have an idea of what we're talking about based on some of the feedback tonight. We'd have to talk more specifically, but I think, some of the conversations that were had, I don't want to make any commitment right now because I don't want to speak for the board, but just a couple of the things that were said tonight are important to, I think, just be more specific about if possible in the document.
Right. There was a lot of comments brought up. So I don't want to be in a position of picking and choosing which ones. So I think it needs to be part of the resolution is what those.
Or we could just adopt as is tonight with an idea and understanding that if we did this again, we'd have another hearing. The problem is, you don't want to create, you want this to be the hearing. We told people this would be the hearing. You don't want to create a whole other new process that comes out of this basically very, I like to be efficient here, but I'm creating another process and I don't necessarily want to do that unless that's what this board wants to do. I'm just saying there's a couple of nitpicky kind of things that it just could be written slightly differently.
Yeah, I recognize they're minor in nature, but I still defer to Mr. Renaud as to
If I could just,
the procedure.
I could just
John,
suggest.
jump in there.
I, understanding exactly what the mayor is saying, I would say that it seems would be the most efficient to adopt the document as proposed tonight because it meets various deadlines and it's important, and then come back and as our attorney suggested, just have another hearing. I don't see that as somehow going back on the process that you have described to the public. The public has in fact got their input, and the fact that we are entertaining making these changes shows that process was followed and the public had appropriate input. So I don't think there's anything wrong with adopting the document, and then if a majority of the planning board wishes it, coming back in and making the minor changes with another hearing, and perhaps we'll hear some more things we need to hear. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay. Or you can have a hearing specific as to the amendments only. I guess we could do that as well. Would that still comply with the
Well, that's
statute?
what I'm suggesting, is someone is going to have to come up with this list of things for Chris to change and how they're to be changed, and then he's going to have to draft those changes, and then they're going to have to be distributed as the proposed changes in the master plan, and then we'll have to have a public hearing.
But can we have his public hearing as to those specific issues that are changed only? Or once you open the hearing, it could be as to any topic in the master plan, even if it's part of which has not been touched since tonight, for example, if this is weeks from now or months from now?
I don't think we can limit the public hearing.
All right, I'm in favor of doing what Mr. Lifton says. I think we should adopt as is tonight with the understanding that maybe we'll come back to the planning board with additional, minor, but additional, some minor changes from our planner.
Understood, Mr. Mayor. I can see the goodwill that's inside of that comment. That's all good. So would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
So the motion would be, again, to adopt the master plan as is, with the understanding that it may be revisited shortly.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Can we have a second, please?
Is the mayor permitted to make a second?
Sure.
Sure he can. All right, we have a second. Secretary, can we have a vote, please? Thank you.
Mayor Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Clarkson,
Yes.
Ms. Koskowski,
Yes.
Mr. Lifton,
Yes.
Ms. Thackariah,
Yes.
Mr. Erickson.
Yes.
Thank you.
So moved and approved. Congratulations. Thank you all. Can I please have a motion to approve the correspondence for April 16th, 2026 for the meeting minutes?
So
Motion to
moved.
approve, so moved, okay, I'll second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, okay. Our meeting minutes are approved. Bob, do you want to reopen the public a second time?
Well, we usually have a public portion, so we could have a public portion. We should, I mean,
Okay.
that's generally what we do on the agenda.
let's do that again.
Not on the master plan, on
Yes.
something else. We're done with the master plan.
Master plan's done, but if you have something else you'd like to discuss with the board, I'm going to reopen the public portion.
So this is going to be about the master plan because that's why we're all here. So is it okay for me to
The
speak?
the hearing
Master
on the
plan-
master plan is done, so we're not going to talk about the
The
master.
mayor just said that I could, so.
Well, hold on, no, I'm not the chair of this meeting, we have an
Yeah.
attorney here, and I'm used to running meetings, but I'm not running this meeting, but I mean, it's theoretically. the
Listen,
attorney-
you know me, I'd love to give everybody as much time as they want, but as far as the master plan is concerned, that matter is concluded for tonight. If you have other things you'd like to share with the board, we're happy to hear them.
No, there's nothing else because that's why we're all here.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for being reasonable. Okay, anyone else in the public have a issue not related to the master plan that they'd like to speak about? Okay, I'm going to say that's a no, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion. That leaves us with only adjournment unless there's anything else anybody else would like to bring up this evening. I'm sorry, you pointing, Mr. Mayor?
No, I'm just.
Okay, okay, great. Then I'm going to say,
I move to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you all.